Oh, this is yours. Yeah. Okay. All right, I call to order this meeting of the Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, March 15th. And I will ask Councillor Faubert to please provide the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge that Canmore is in the Treaty 7 territory, the traditional home of the Iahe Nakota, or Stoney Nakota, comprised of the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley bands, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Blackfoot Confederacy, and the Métis Region 3 zone. I acknowledge and keep in the front of my mind at all times that this is their traditional home, and I commit wholeheartedly to the work of reconciliation.
Thank you very much. Now we'll turn to the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? No? Okay. Oh, are you wanting to speak?
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Turn my mic on. You have to turn my mic on. The item of meeting the new fire chief, we need to postpone. There was a COVID exposure this morning at the fire hall, and they're scrambling to get on set up for Zoom for later in the meeting. So we will just postpone the meeting of Chief Bushy to a future meeting.
Okay, so we'll just strike that.
Strike it from this agenda.
The agenda. Very good. Thank you. Anything else? No? All right. Then I'll move approval of the agenda for March 15th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we'll move to delegations. Ms. Stanton, the first delegation is Bow Valley Learning Council. Excellent. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here in person. I'm sure you all agree. So thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council. For those of you that I haven't had opportunity to meet, my name is Brenda Stanton, and I took on the role of Executive Director of Bow Valley Learning Council about 10 months ago. I do have Min Sun with me today. She's one of our board members. I think we might have one or two board members on Zoom, and we have others at their regular places of work working away today. I hope to not take too much time in my presentation and allow a little bit more time for you to ask questions. I can. Now I have to use my left hand. So really what today's presentation will cover, the role of a CALP. So expanding on the information that was presented in your agenda package. Really the 5 primary areas of learning that CALPs offer, additional learning that we can provide. I really want to dive into who we serve and the role that we play in building a stronger, more equitable community, excuse me, plus the challenges we face. So the program vision, and this is a provincial program, is changing lives through adult foundational learning in connected communities, thus the presentation to Council. It is all about connected communities. We'll see if it'll play. Always happens, right? It doesn't appear like it wants to play today. That's okay. So the 5 areas of foundational learning that we offer. Adult literacy, numeracy, skills for learning, basic digital skills, English language learning, and I really need to give a shout out to our program coordinator, our instructors, and our volunteers. The English language learning program that Bow Valley Learning Council has is held up as the gold standard within the CALP system. And as I said, I take no credit for that, but it's certainly a team of dedicated individuals. What we need to do is build on that to work in some of the other areas. And we can, of course, also offer community capacity building. So who is a CALP learner or client? We tend to use the terms interchangeably. For our English language learners, we tend to classify them as learners. Most of them, with the exception of some of our refugees from the East African countries, have an educational background. Many have post-secondary degrees. So they see themselves as learners. They're very used to the pedagogy mentality of teacher, student. The teacher names the goals, they follow the goals. Clients are more of our foundational learners, those that don't see themselves as learners. They're really hard to reach, that need those foundational skills. Most have been traumatized within the regular school system, or they've experienced other traumas. So really the three key pieces are the newcomers with those minimal language skills, newcomers improving their English language skills, and our Canadian-born adults that have fallen through the cracks. Now hopefully this video will play. If not, then it will get really short. Always the problem, right? It's all good. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Roger then. And the reason why I wanted you to hear Roger's own voice. Roger actually is a success of the system. So Roger actually was a foundational learner with the John Howard Society in Calgary. Roger got to a point of almost committing suicide. His background was in grade 1. It was recognized that he had a reading deficiency. Before starting school, he really questioned why other kids could make friends, why he was so different than everybody else. So they did put him in a special needs program, and then in grade 5, he was put back into his regular class. About 2 weeks in, his teacher in front of the class said, you know, everybody do your reading. If you don't, you're gonna end up like Roger. I wish that that didn't still happen, but it does. I currently teach post-secondary. I have 2 learners. I'm in regional. The first time that we were talking about their first essay, one of the girls said, I can't write. And I said, I'm going to guess that when you were in elementary school, somebody told you you couldn't write. And she said, yeah. And then another student piped up, and she's in her early 20s, and she said, and I was told that I would never graduate. And here they are both taking post-secondary. Those are the hard to reach, and those are also the ones that hide very well within our communities of Banff and Canmore. Hospitality is a fantastic hiding spot, right? Because we are so desperate for employees, especially in dish pits, in housekeeping. It is so easy to hide. And quite honestly, it was probably only about 10 years ago that I really started putting 2 and 2 together with some of the employees that I worked with, where their anger was coming from, where the substance use was coming from. It wasn't the substance abuse from the anger. The underlying thing was that they lacked their reading and writing skills. So we are really here to help create a more equitable society. This is my favorite picture depicting equality versus equity. So when you see those additional steps, helping those folks reach those apples, that's us, right? That's us building that foundation. Some of our challenges. Funds available for permanent space here in Canmore. We know that for those foundational learners, the Rogers of the world, they need consistency. They need a safe place, and they know where to go. And how the town of Canmore can possibly help. One, we are going to embark on discussions with the provincial government to take over some of the space that used to be held by Bow Valley College in the provincial building. However, even since writing this weekend I discovered that infrastructure is now charging market rate to CALPs that are currently housed in provincial buildings. So I know there's one in East Central Alberta that went from a 0 rent rate to $58,000 a year. So we'll see, but I also have some other ideas of where we might be able to find some space, and to explore in-kind space grants for community-based groups like a CALP. I recognize that there's little known about CALPs, and that's why I'm here today, just to really introduce you to what we do, because it is about community and meeting our community needs. And with that, I open it up for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Stanton, for coming today and sharing about CALPs, and also introducing us to things that we wouldn't have known, such as Roger's story. Excuse me. Well, before opening up to questions, with regards to those ways that, council or the town could be involved, we would deal with them specifically here, but if you're needing letters of support, if there's particular things that you'd like to discuss, please reach out and let's have those conversations. Okay.
Absolutely.
So looking to council, see if there are any questions. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Ms. Stanton, for your presentation. How has COVID affected the program, and do you anticipate a resumption to pre-COVID numbers of learners and clients in the future?
We do. So certainly, our numbers crashed. Again, kudos to the team that was there who very quickly pivoted to online. Our instructors, there was 2 or 3 that simply waived their fees and became volunteers and just really tried to help our learners through. I know prior to me coming into my role, a couple of classes had to be canceled because we just didn't have enough uptake. We will likely cancel one that was to start next week that was also online, but we're going to replace that one with an in-person in about 2 weeks. Our in-person classes, our fall, we were a little bit short in Canmore, but our most recent ones, which are ending this week, we had good numbers. So we had maximum in one class in Banff, about half in the other, and about just over half in Canmore. So we're getting there, absolutely. People want face-to-face.
Have you identified any municipal facilities that could meet your need not in a permanent way, but in a space rental way?
I have. So certainly when we talk about classroom size, because again, if we can take care of the classroom and I don't have to worry about negotiating, things like that, then I can focus on an office and other safe space. And really, so space-wise, 212 in Elevation Place, right? That would be kind of the size. It's really important to have locations that are easy to get to by transit. So certainly the downtown. Our office, we have office time 1 day a week, and we rent space from the Center for Business Excellence. And the reason why we chose there was because we knew we could also capture some of our Banffites if they're coming out to buy groceries on a Tuesday and that type of thing. So very strategic in where we're looking, for sure.
Our facility rental policy does allow a reduced rate for nonprofits. Is that within your range?
It's cutting it close. We've been extremely lucky and grateful. The Women Nancy Powell Foundation really stepped up this year. I reached out to them and said, I have the benefit of knowing hotels. I said, I'm wondering if you would consider offering us meeting space for cost. They came back to me with a price, and I said, I think the cost would be this. And they said, okay. So the foundation is subsidizing us substantially. So we're literally paying $35 per class. And if we're able to get 2 classes on the same day, they only charge us 1 fee, and that's it. So incredibly reduced rates, and hugely grateful to the foundation for sponsoring that. Our landlord in Banff actually also sponsors us a huge amount for one of our spaces there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I know we recently changed our community grant requirements, so that might create an opening for you instead of a new type of grant for space, but I don't know if you knew that.
I know that Ms. Brown mentioned that and said, yes, I will definitely look.
Okay.
For sure. But thank you. Thank you so much, Councillor Faubert.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Stanton. I was going through your report here, and you talk about how, I guess one of the casualties of this time has been the drop-in conversation class.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Sure.
Yep.
So from a cost perspective, we try and offer everything from no cost to a really low cost, with the most expensive class being $150 for 32 hours of instruction. And that's a true in-classroom class. So because it's run by volunteers, we have no cost. It's not in our budget to afford anything as far as space. So we called a lot of, and I totally appreciate that every not-for-profit has suffered greatly over COVID. I have no qualms about that. But yes, we were unable to secure any type of space that we could hold this. The good news is we're maybe sneaking into some public space later this month with the knowledge that, you know, if there's other people there, then we're going to do a walk and talk instead. So we're looking to start that at the end of March.
Okay, and what time do classes typically occur? Because I know you have a different
It
demographic
varies.
sometimes.
Yeah, so the conversation class, which here in Canmore has always been really robust. This is the only community currently that they've offered the conversation class. And that occurs between 10:30 and noon on either Tuesday or Wednesday mornings. We currently have a writing class right now in our little classroom in Banff. We do pre-beginner English language learning in Lake Louise in person in the afternoon because our clients there are, they work night shift in laundry. And most of our English language classes occur between 6:30 and 8:30.
At night?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so we very much gear it around the schedules of what we know the hospitality industry has.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Stanton, for coming to speak to council. It's nice to see you in person
Nice to
again.
see you.
I never see you. So I am grateful to Councillor Faubert for bringing up our new grants policy. There might be some space in there, but I appreciate your comment with regards to where people hide. I think I'm a first-generation Canadian, and I think of my grandparents and my mom and where they used to hide in terms of their language, English not being their first language, and it was in hospitality. It was in the laundry of the hospital. It was in the kitchen of the old folks' home. So I never really thought about it from that perspective. So thank you for bringing that to light. I'm curious, and a lot of great questions have been asked, but I'm curious if you can tell me pre-COVID, how many hours a month of instruction or learning or conversation cafes or whatever did
What's
the
going
Learning
on?
Council, I don't know if that's something that you could actually,
Yeah, I honestly don't know. It was, when I started pulling out the data, how we report to government is numbers of learners as opposed to hours. I do know, because I happen to be looking this weekend, so far this year in just our English language learning, so our true classroom classes, we have had over 200 instructional hours,
wow.
which is
This
awesome.
year,
Yes,
right.
yeah, so, and that is from July 1st through to now. So that was at the end of February.
Okay, so your fiscal year is not a calendar year. Gotcha.
Correct, correct.
All right, that's great information. Thank you very much.
Councillor Merrow.
Hi, thank you. Good to see you again, too. You talked in percentages and you talked in hours. Can you tell me what base, like how many, like in terms of how many people you're actually reaching?
So right now, I can tell you, so far this year, I'm trying to remember what I reported to the board.
Just a guess, good guesses.
well over 150 to 200. So right now we have, and I'll preface this with, we also don't have any full-time employees. So admin is all part-time. For our instructors, I believe we now have 12 different instructors, and then we also have about 12 volunteers that do the one-to-one tutoring or coaching. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. And when you're looking for space, does it, I don't know if it would affect how your program works, but are you looking for one specific spot that is familiar and everybody comes there, or is your group willing to move or have programs in different spots?
I'm going to say both. So for our Rogers of the world, it's really important to have consistency and that safety, because most of those clients have had so much trauma in their life. That consistency is really important. For our more advanced English language learning, we keep changing classrooms, absolutely, because we're relying on hotels right now. The downfall this last go-round was with the masters, and certainly I'm a hotelier at heart, as I think you all know. We got bumped for the Masters, which I totally get. I mean, they were told us that at the very beginning. So that then put a bigger dent into our budget, paying closer to real prices. So our classes, we like to hold the whole series in the same place, but absolutely, we can go to different places.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Ms. Stanton. I noticed in your report that Banff seems to serve about 50% more, 100% more than Canmore does in general, in spite of having half the population we do. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I can.
That's sure you could.
So certainly, the one, we do have permanent space in Banff. So that made a difference. Two, the organization, and I'm not going to lie, me especially, have very much hammered Banff hotels as well. So for example, right now we have a permanent seat at the HR table with the Human Resource Committee of all the hotels. We're now to a point where some of the Banff hotels ask us how much we're going to be charging for our classes so that they can budget accordingly. So we have a really tight connection there. The goal, 100% to get that in Canmore, absolutely. So we will be presenting to the Canmore Hotel and Lodging Association in May. And it's my understanding that Tourism Canmore is also there, as well as the Bow Valley Chamber of Commerce, kind of everybody. And I think too, again, there's far more numbers, just sheer numbers, in Banff, in the hospitality world than there are in Canmore.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. But you'll see that the Canmore numbers are getting closer. And we're actually discovering this year that we are getting more of the truly foundational learners, the Rogers, here. That's where that's coming from. Again, why it's so important that we get that space. Right now, actually, one of our board members, Renera, they've got an empty office over at the Job Resource Center. We use that. We're all over the place, and that's just not conducive, for sure. Me too.
Well, thank you, Ms. Stanton, for being here today, and thank you for the essential work that you and the Bow Valley Learning Council does for members of our community to be able to help them integrate and be fully accessible to all the things that we enjoy here. So it's really, really important work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to leave with each of you. For years, our students have been writing books. So I stole the couple last copies we have. And each year, they actually present. So this past year, we had it on Zoom. And I just gave them so much credit for the courage to both write and then present. And I'd also like to extend to you an invitation. We have a class here in Canmore this evening. Starts at 6:30. We're over in the Center for Business Excellence. I've asked the students if they would be okay if you stopped in at the beginning of class, and I said, absolutely. So if anybody wants to stop in and see us in action, we're there. But thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you. We'll now move to our second delegation, which is the Shaw Internet Infrastructure Update. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm not doing the big presentation here, but I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, give a little bit of a background to what we're doing. We have a short presentation today from Mr. Stephen Olmsted from Shaw Communications, who is up here on the screen. And he'll be speaking to some of the community benefits that we're seeing already as a result of the partnership we've had with Shaw. These are still early stages, but I think it speaks to some of the long-range intentions of council and the organization. A little bit of background here, the Town IT Department and Shaw have had a partnership for the last 2 years, and we've been working on a number of projects to upgrade the town offices to fiber internet and redundant connections. So our focus has been the town offices without any question. That's what we've been doing. However, once this new architecture is complete, and when it is complete for the town's perspective, for the administration's perspective, that's going to give us higher performance, greater stability, and a much better response to any incidents both inside and outside the town. You know, cable failures, weather, disasters, or whatever, it gives us much better response. And these changes we're making in the town have been foundational to the digital transformation of the town. As we want to go more services online, we want to provide more systems, we must have this fiber connections. In 2021, Shaw and ourselves delivered projects for the Civic Centre here, Elevation Place and Public Works to bring fiber and backup connections into all those buildings. In the case of Public Works, for example, we increased our capacity there by 100 times over where we were before. In 2022, we continue with a couple more projects. One is for the Rec Centre, and the second one is for the new fire hall location. We're not necessarily going to be able to terminate there this year, but we'll put the groundwork in so that they will also have high-speed fiber redundant connection when they get there. So a lot of work going on here. I'll hand over to Mr. Olmsted, and he's going to discuss some of the spin-offs we're starting to see, which we'd always hoped for, and how that's are going to benefit the community as a whole, rather than just the administration. So with that, I'll hand over to Mr. Olmsted.
Great, thank you. Mr. Olmsted,
right.
Welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor, and it's nice to meet you and the councillors, and thank you, Gordon, for the introduction. Yes, I do want to emphasize, and please let me know if a picture gets put up there. I did send over a screen capture of a location, if you guys can let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, it's in progress.
In progress? Perfect.
Just one second here. Okay, there we go.
Perfect.
Yep. All right.
So on this journey that we've been on over the last 2 years, this is one of the interesting benefits of specifically the expansion of fiber infrastructure into the Glacier Drive area. As you can see by that little tree sign up at the very top of the map, the Canmore Parks. That's the Public Works building, obviously, for the town of Canmore. And what's interesting, what has happened over the last year here, is by that relationship and that partnership in enabling the town of Canmore to get that access to that fiber infrastructure in that Public Works building, it's actually had a direct spin-off effect on Shaw actually now looking at before the end of 2022, expanding into that purple colored area there. And it's actually a straight and direct investment from Shaw of close to $1.1 million to bring DOCSIS level internet and also fiber links into that industrial park. So right along the Elk Run Boulevard and all the areas colored. One of the interesting parts about this expansion and what the benefits of those businesses in those areas is that our analysts said that we're going to be touching close to or just sub 100 businesses in that area. And that will actually allow them access to all of our current Shaw suite that obviously you could the majority of the town does already have, especially on the residential side. But all these traditional brownfield industrial areas obviously have challenges in infrastructure traditionally, not just in Canmore, but in other municipalities we serve. So a direct spin-off of this journey that we've been on with the town of Canmore, this partnership we've had with the town of Canmore over the past 2 years, is actually leading to our private investment of expanding broadband capabilities throughout that entire area as part of phase 1. Interestingly enough, as we go on this journey, I'm only speaking to what we are actually doing at this moment. So this isn't high-level projection. This is ongoing right now. We actually have a completion date, and I'll put an asterisk beside of that because obviously we are still subject to supply chain challenges and construction challenges. But right now, as far as slated of completion date for delivery of broadband, or Shaw DOCSIS level broadband throughout that area is July 29th of 2022. Currently it's in permitting phase. So actually perhaps some of your town planners are aware that Shaw's been applying for applications for line assignments and so on and so forth throughout that area. And then on this journey, realizing that once we get this going, as you can look just to the west of that, there's also a significant need based on our data and businesses calling in of expanding that broadband to the west as well once we get established here. Also, just so council is aware, the other projects that are ongoing, including to the new fire station and into the rec center, we're actually currently evaluating if there's any spin-off effects or any expansion that we can do off of that main line. And so we're currently looking at that right now as well. And so basically to summarize is, and what Gordon wanted to explain and what I wanted, because obviously we've been part of this program, is that this partnership, which was about town services and redundancy for the town and specific to your operational needs, has actually led to private investment from Shaw to expand to your business owners in that area that I know perhaps you've been hearing are starving for some decent bandwidth at competitive pricing. So I, instead of telling the entire journey from the beginning, like Gordon was saying on how we got to this point, I'll leave it at that. And if there's any questions, I'll do my best to facilitate those answers. If I do not have those answers, I will be sure to reach out to the appropriate members within our organization to provide those answers. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I would just ask, well, I can see Mr. Olmsted up in the corner there now. Are you able to say what percentage of Canmore would be benefiting from broadband right now?
You know, to give an exact number that I can stand behind, no, I don't have the exact. I know for residential areas, like as far as residential access to broadband, like 1 gig, it would be in the 90th percentile, sir. I know that for sure, except for maybe some separated communities. Sometimes we have challenges with that. The majority of challenges you'll find with bandwidth is not necessarily in new development in residential. It will be in these brownfield industrial and commercial areas that have been long existing, just because of the challenges and the cost, obviously the civil build cost of driving new infrastructure into brownfield, as we can all appreciate. So on the residential side, I would be comfortable saying in the 90th percentile for the town of Canmore have access to 1 gig internet if they choose so. And then on the business side, there are that's a significant industrial area down in that section, sir. And as you can appreciate, your downtown core has access to broadband and fiber. But as far as the actual percentage point, sir, I don't know, but I would put it at 70. But we could actually do an analysis for you and provide you where we do touch and where we do not touch. We do provide those. And then you could actually have a very accurate capture of at least what Shaw touches. And whatever Shaw touches does have gig capable internet, sir.
I really appreciate that answer. I was really looking for sort of a range, and you've definitely provided that. So thank you very much. And it's very good news to know that the work that was started to support the town of Canmore's connection has benefited through the investment of Shaw, the neighboring businesses or the businesses in that area. So thank you very much. I'm looking to council to see if there are any other questions. Councillor Faubert.
My understanding is that the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Commission does set some targets for this type of service to Canadian communities. How are we meeting that? Does this get us further towards that target?
Thank you, Ms. You're exceeding it 10 times. The minimum by CRTC for broadband, and I'm not government relations, so I'm quoting this based on what I previously know, I believe is 5010. So that was a 50 megabit download with a 10 megabit upload. The infrastructure available to that industrial area where we're doing that spin-off investment. I don't like to use the word spin-off, but you know what I mean? Like an investment off of your guys' investment or your service need is going to be giving 1 gig. So 1 gig above, like where the minimum is 50 down, 10 up. We're going to be able to deliver 1 gig, so 1,000, and then 125 to 150 up. So the access to that area surpasses the CRTC's minimum recommendation significantly.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll note that our RCMP detachment is in that area, and we have.
I did see that, Miss, and I am. It's once again we aren't in this stage. Is that we are building it. It's an interesting actually journey if you think about it, because before at one time telco's been evolving, and I won't speak on behalf of all telco companies. I can speak on behalf of this project and what this represents to our organization in this journey. Is that this, like we used to always go out, because we're a private industry, we'd have to go out, acquire revenue, and then justify expense, as it makes sense in private business, because we couldn't just go around spending a ton of money and hoping, unfortunately, because obviously we're private industry, not non-for-profit. But interestingly enough, with the understanding of the importance of broadband capability and the importance and the shift as we all went through, especially with COVID, of online and businesses requiring that, and residents, is that Shaw at least has really taken a different, a longer vision goal, where we're not going out there and needing to prove out immediate revenue to justify costs, where now we're looking at foundational investments off of core infrastructure, and actually we're taking more risk with that. And so I know you brought up the RCMP, is what I'm getting at, is that interestingly enough, we're spending this money without engaging those customers or putting them on the spot for commitments. We truly believe that this investment will reap benefits down the road towards Shaw Communications. And it's also a gentler way to go about this, because we're not having to contractually guarantee revenue off of business users or end users. And so it's actually a very gentle approach to broadband expansion. And that's why I think we need to develop better relationships, like with the town of Canmore, with council, with awareness of what we're trying to achieve, because the model we're using right now is actually groundbreaking. And I don't mean that, like, Canmore was an early adopter of a relationship directly with an ISP to achieve a goal, without the middle ground of consulting between council and the ISPs. Gordon decided to release an RFP and directly work with an ISP. And we're actually seeing that those kind of relationships like we have with Canmore, it, number one, makes the projects actually kick off a lot faster. They're also more accountable to achieving those goals. As you can see, in 2 years, we've nearly achieved everything that the town of Canmore set out on. And now we're talking about the residual or the after effects of those investments helping out the community. And that's all with a direct relationship between ISP and municipality. And I'll touch on that for one reason, is because right now, as you can appreciate, in the overall across Canada, there is a need for rural broadband expansion. And it's actually, we're using the Canmore model as that relationship, that direct relationship between ISP and municipality or a form of government. And actually, currently, that model is being extremely well received through the counties of Wheatland, Sturgeon County, Tabor County. So all these other areas that have geographical challenges, they all have the same challenge of rural broadband or broadband accessibility. But the one thing but everyone has their own geographical and demographical challenges to achieve those goals. But what we're finding is, or what organizations are finding, is that direct relationship or that direct communication between ISP and government or governing bodies is having immense success. And Canmore is one of the early adopters, and you guys are already starting to feel the spin-off opportunities from that direct relationship. I know that's a long way to answer your RCMP question, but I wanted to kind of put that into context, because it was a long journey.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Looking to see if there's any other questions. Seeing none, thank you very much for being with us today, sir, and thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for enlightening us on what's happening in the industrial area.
You're welcome, sir.
Oh, I've got.
I thought council might just like to be reminded that Mr. Reid is on the verge of leaving the town of Canmore for other Arctic adventures, and so I thought you might want to be reminded of that.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mr. Reid, for all of your service to the town. When is your last day? Thursday. Oh, it's a week Thursday. Well, thank you very all the best wishes going forward, and thank you for all the work that you've done and the steps forward that you've taken for us. So thank you. Yeah, thank you. Now turning to item C1 of our agenda, the minutes of the February 15th Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Everyone's looking to Councillor Hillstad. All right. Yeah, he's deputy mayor this go around, so he gets to give his feedback during the agenda review meeting, which I can attest to he did. Seeing no errors or omissions, I will move approval of the minutes of February 15th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving to item D1, Protective Services 2021 Annual Reports. Ms. Miller and Mr. Burt.
So, hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us today to present the 2021 Protective Services Annual Report. So I'm here with Mr. Burt, the Bylaw Services Supervisor, and Staff Sergeant Ryan Singleton and Sergeant Jack Roble from the Canmore RCMP Detachment. So Mr. Burt will begin, and then I'll provide the Automated Traffic Enforcement Report, and then Staff Sergeant Singleton will follow with the Canmore Community RCMP Report. So, Mr. Burt.
Sounds like a plan. Mr. Burt, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Crezart, members of council. Nice to see you all. You have the report contained within your package, but I wanted to provide some highlights as to what we're up to in the Bylaw Services Department for the past year. Quarry Lake was the first thing that jumped to mind for me in conjunction with the paid parking rollout. And it was more than just a new program. It was about being more visible in the community with hiring 4 seasonal ambassadors, bylaw enforcement officers. One thing that jumped out at me from the summer, and I still continue to hear this year, are all of the positive comments that we receive from locals and visitors about the increased visitor experience at Quarry Lake and about the improved livability for residents. So the program and staffing has absolutely impacted what we're seeing up there in a positive manner. I lived through 2020 at Quarry Lake, and it's something that I've never seen before, and I hope I never have to experience again. So it absolutely had a very positive impact. The seasonal officers did more than just parking. They were highly visible, conducting education about the new parking program as it rolled out. Parks bylaws, so we had officers stationed at the entrance to the park, welcoming people to the park, reminding them about the rules. If they came up with a cooler, they'd remind them about alcohol, things of that nature. Then we went into wildlife education, so we have several visitors that have never been to the mountain parks, just reminding them about wildlife that come into the area. And then clarifying the differences between the Kananaskis Conservation Pass and paid parking at Quarry Lake. So several visitors had purchased their Kananaskis Conservation Pass and were assuming that that included parking at Quarry Lake, that they weren't within the town of Canmore. So again, having those 4 officers were critical to the success of the program. They started right at the start of May. The paid parking wasn't even up and running. We were, as Chief Gaylor used to say, what did he say? We're building the plane as we're flying it. So that's what we were doing, but we figured it out quick. We extended their contracts by a month, so we extend them right up until the end of September. And we increased our normal hours of work. So on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, we had officers working till 7 p.m. Actually caught a lot of people off guard when our officers were up there at 6 o'clock at night. One thing I got them to do to track this year was the number of contacts. So a contact was defined as anything where they had some sort of information that was provided, a question was asked. So that could be anything from, hey, what's the difference between a black bear and a grizzly bear? Where's a good place to eat? Where's the public washroom? Do I have to pay for parking at the Nordic Center? So we had tracked 10,700 contacts by our 4 seasonal ambassadors. It's a pretty huge number if you think about it. And I would say probably, oh boy, 98% of them are positive. So just great having that seasonal program. We're going to continue with the seasonal program, yet it's going to shift under the paid parking coordinator with the same approach. Point number 2 that jumped out was reducing human-wildlife interactions within the community. So we continue to work collaboratively with Alberta Environment and Parks and their human-wildlife conflict biologist, and more specifically around fruit trees and attracting bears. I know it's the 2021 report, but 2020, if you recall, bears seem to be attracted to fruit-bearing trees and bushes downtown and in Larch. Last year, they were up in the peaks of Grassy. No rhyme or reason as to where they're going or what they're doing. We did do quite a bit of work, though, downtown in 2020, and then in 2021, spending more time in the peaks of Grassy. So our officers issued informational letters, essentially a warning letter about removing fruit from fruit trees, to 48 property owners in the peaks of Grassy regarding wildlife attractants. When we're at a full staffing complement, the goal would be to continue to track those and then go back out in the spring to ensure that the fruit from those trees was removed or the trees or shrubs were removed. And I premise that with kind of point number 3 of staffing, no shock or surprise, ongoing challenge in 2021 that's carrying into 2022. So at no point was the department fully staffed in 2021. We should be a complement of 7 full-time staff, so myself, 5 full-time officers. We brought in the additional officer that was during the 2021 budget, and a full-time administrative assistant. Currently, I know we're talking 21, but right now we're running at 20% of what our full-time staffing complement should be from a full-time officer perspective. Granted, we are in recruitment right now. So we are doing our best to continue to be proactive in the community, but our prime focus is being reactive. From a statistical highlight, the number of investigations dropped by about 12%. Of the 1,018 investigations, 80% were reactive and 20% were proactive. So proactive meaning we're going out and identifying issues or concerns. This year we've been spending more time identifying things like snow and ice on sidewalk that's being built up for the entire season. Identifying commercial vehicles that are parked for extended periods of time up on Glacier Drive. So we want to go out and identify those concerns before a resident or a business gives us a call. That is the overview of the year, and Mayor Krauser, members of council, if you're okay, I would like to provide an update from the administrative report now, just because it's the end of the agenda, and I'd like to head out after, if that's all right.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, contained within the administrative report, effective April 4th, the Bylaw Services Department will be changing its name to the Municipal Enforcement Department. We're doing this for a number of reasons. One, to better reflect the professionalism of the community peace officer position. This is going to address some of the perceptions around the term bylaw officer, or you're just bylaw. We're going to align with our regional partners. So Banff, Cochrane, Okotoks, Airdrie, all of their departments are known as the Municipal Enforcement Department. We're going to differentiate the roles of the Municipal Enforcement Department and the paid parking program. We've already started to undertake some of this work, so the shoulder flashes that you see on my uniform, the vehicle that's parked outside has already been updated. And a new email will go out as of April 4th, which will be enforcement@canmore.ca. So it's important to note that although our name is changing, our level of commitment to engage with residents and visitors to contribute to a safe and livable community remains the same. And I've been here a long time. I was in the municipal enforcement department before. I was part of the change to bylaw services. And now I'm bringing it back in under municipal enforcement. But again, our commitment really is about being proactive in the community, engaging, highly focused on education. We're a compliance-based department, and we will step in and do enforcement as needed. And again, we just want to be more visible out there. Councillor Graham, prime example, ran into you at the hockey game this weekend, and kind of the highlight for me was, it was about a 6 or 7-year-old boy came up, said hi, and gave me the knuckle chuckle, right? It was like, it's just good to be out there and be visible in the community, and that's the team that I want to build. So that's where we're headed. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Burt. So as supervisor of the department, that makes you head of med? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that one. That's the way. Thank you. Can I put that on my business card?
Absolutely. I had a question around the staffing challenges, and I was wondering if there's any primary reason or reasons for that, like housing or cost of living, or it's just it's a difficult job. Can you attribute it to anything?
I think it's a combination of factors, right? Cost of living, it's a difficult job, absolutely. You know, as I'm back in uniform, it reminds me that, you know, we see some positive people out there, but, you know, there's a lot of people that aren't impressed with the fact that we're telling them to leash their dog, or that they need to move their vehicle or clear their sidewalk. Yeah. Those are a couple of the contributing factors. I think that one of the challenges has been the bylaw services department and not being recognized about the work it takes to be a community peace officer, and that we do far more than just bylaw work. So I think that's going to be a positive change. One of the comments that resonated with me with a recent departure was feeling a bit undervalued and underappreciated by the community as a whole. So we're striving to work on that. And then just the nature of the work. It's a unique, I would say that our department is a unique department in the view that we take in terms of being a compliance-based department that's not heavily focused on tickets, fine revenues, and I'm happy to support that, and I'm happy to lead that program. And when people get into this role, it's challenging to find that person that wants to take a compliance-based approach, be partners in the community, can do enforcement as needed. And I mean, I've lived in Banff for 20 years, worked here for 20 years. I'm really happy to be part of both communities. I always say it's easier for me to leave the community when I'm finished the end of my day, because, you know, you run into people that are saying things, pointing at you. So I've said, in my opinion, it's one of the toughest jobs, if not the toughest job in the town of Canmore. So I'm working with HR, with Caitlin, about how do we now keep staff here longer? What else do we need to do? How else can we make it more enjoyable to come into work? There's just a number of challenges.
Yeah, well, thank you for persevering through them, because I know it puts a lot of weight on the few that are in uniform right now. And you certainly are appreciated. I'm going to turn to some questions in a moment, but, you know, since the election, I've had a lot of people come up to me, and I'm sure other elected officials as well, say, oh, you got to be crazy to go into that job. Well, you know what? There's a lot of difficulties that you face. So there's a similar type of thing. So I certainly empathize and really appreciate what you do. So,
thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Burt, for your presentation. I wonder if you might be able to clarify a number for me. It might be a typo.
Okay.
Domestic animal control in the pie graph is 111 incidents, or 11%. And in the next page, animal control bylaw was 11 tickets.
So on the pie graph, those are the investigations that we would have investigated.
Okay.
So dog barking, lost dog, found dog, etc. And then moving into the next graph are warnings and tickets that we would have issued under that bylaw.
Okay.
So a investigation doesn't always result in a warning or ticket being issued.
Absolutely. So we only issued 11 tickets for off-leash dogs?
This would have been we would have only issued 11 tickets under the animal control bylaw in 2021. So that could be, again, barking dog, unlicensed dog, off-leash dog.
Okay. Is that historically consistent? Low, high?
I would say it's likely low. The numbers vary over the years.
Sure.
And that comes from staffing levels. So again, just highlighting last year being down staff, mostly reactive in the community, responding to calls for service, and not having that ability to be out and be proactive in the community.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome. Great question.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Burt, for your presentation. In your report, it says 2 community peace officers have completed their required peace officer transition training for level 1 appointments. Is that your full complement?
Well, I'm one of them, so that's part of the compliment. The other officer is now working in another municipality and is a casual officer. So out of the 2 full-time officers I have right now, one is currently scheduled to go and partake in the training, which is an 11-week training program. So he'll be starting in April, and the other officer has 1 more course to complete that CPO transition.
And then It says eligible for appointments. Are you not appointed? What do we have to do?
So we are appointed as community peace officers. Currently, there's 2 levels within the program, a community peace officer level 2, of which we are, community peace officers level 1, of which we're not. Banff's a good comparison, and the easiest way to always describe that in my mind is they have the authority to deal with moving traffic violations, i.e. speeding tickets, stop signs, etc. The CPO2 program is no longer, or the province is no longer issuing CPO2 appointments. Everyone will need to qualify to the new level by the end of the year. So I've qualified. We're currently doing some work to get our authorization to employ peace officers updated by the province, at which point we'll be working with CSD and then coming back through council at a later date to talk about if there's any additional authorities that we would want to take on.
And then that's when you would be officially appointed?
We'll actually be officially appointed once we get the authorization to employ, but we'll continue to be restricted to our current duties.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I thought it was, you got it and you're, yes,
Yes.
certified.
No, when I passed the physical examination, which I was probably one of the older people there, I was pretty happy to do that. I was doing one of these because I didn't want to have to do it again, let me tell you.
Awesome. I have one more question, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
With respect to bears and wildlife attractants and fruit trees, are we tracking at all for our records the number of bears that are removed from the community, or the number of bears where bylaw is is working with Fish and Wildlife? And I'll give you my reasoning for the question is that I think that from like a policy governance perspective, I'd like to know what's happening to those bears once they're removed in order to make sure like we have the right policies in place.
So we don't track the number of bears in the community that are removed. That would be a great question for Alberta Environment and Parks. We do meet with them regularly, and it's more from an operational basis of introductions between officers, what are our goals for the year, where are we seeing bears in the community. There was a report done a couple of years ago about number of fruit trees in the community. But no, I don't have that number, and it isn't something we track.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. Looking at the pie chart here, could you elaborate a bit more on the part about taxi accounting for 5% of investigations? Is that a safety issue for the drivers themselves or a client issue?
Taxis, maybe a bit of clarify that for you. We license all of the taxi cab drivers and all of the brokers in town. Mm-hmm. So they end up in our systems. When we license a driver, it shows up as an investigation.
Oh, okay. So it's not like a...
No. Okay. So we receive a few complaints a year, and when we're at a full staffing complement, we actually proactively go out and we'll conduct taxi inspections to ensure that the driver contained in there has a taxi cab driver's license, and that all of the requirements contained within the bylaw would be adhering to that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Burt. I don't see any further questions, so I appreciate all the information you provided today.
Welcome. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. And Ms. Miller, automated traffic enforcement.
Perfect. So you do have the reports in front of you, so I'll do the same as Mr. Burt and highlight a few points from that report. So automated traffic enforcement saw an increase in hours of 34% in 2021 compared to 2020. In 2020, we had numerous COVID-19 related reductions in service, and those were restored last year. Over 8,900 speed violations were captured by automated traffic enforcement in the community in 2021, with 70% of those committing violations being vehicles not registered in the community. The automated traffic enforcement fine revenues contributed to numerous projects in 2021, including several active transportation projects such as traffic calming medians, sidewalk upgrades in Mountaineers Village, upgrades to sidewalks and crosswalks in Stewart Creek, and the installation of 10 new bike racks throughout town. The fine revenues also continue to support our new driver course rebate program, where upon successful completion of driver's education training and confirmation of a driver's license, a $250 rebate is available to new Canmore residents. 52 new drivers received rebates last year. Revenues continue to support additional RCMP policing hours to provide enhanced services within the community. And we do continue to evaluate and review the photo radar program. I will be presenting a full review of the automated traffic enforcement program at an upcoming spring council meeting. Any questions?
That's an excellent question. Looking to council. Councillor Faubert.
What were the net revenues from automated traffic enforcement in 2021?
They were. So we do have a number of, we have to give money to the province, to our contractor. So it was $252,479 for the net revenues.
Okay.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I've got a bunch of questions for this one, if that's okay. The percentage of time spent in playground zones versus all other in your report is 40% to 60%. Is that a goal, or is that the actual numbers that we are seeing?
Those are the numbers that we're seeing, so they do vary month by month. So those were averages over the year. They spend more time in playground zones during school hours, or they have a schedule that they change and vary so that it's not very predictable, but
good.
Yeah, they try to keep it a little balanced, but playground zones are an area of priority.
Excellent. Can you tell me the difference in revenue from playground zones to all other zones?
I don't have that information right now. I would really have to go back and go through kind of month by month that what zone was, how many violations were committed in what zone.
Okay. I've got lots of questions, but I'm just going to cut to the chase. What evidence do you have that the photo radar program has made the streets of Canmore safer?
So one really good example is Palliser Trail. We actually took, starting April 1st, it will no longer be a photo radar zone, because we were able to track how often people were speeding in that zone with the photo radar, or with the automated traffic enforcement that was done there. And with the projects that we did, the traffic calming projects, we have not seen as much speeding in that area. So when we did a recent review of the zones, we actually took that one off. So it, I believe, it gives us the information that we need to be able to make those decisions and put in more engineering type of traffic calming pieces to make the streets safer. With it being 70% non-resident, it's hard to build up those habits in town because people are coming from out of the community and are committing speeding violations in those areas.
So we can engineer our way out of speeding tickets.
That's the goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we want to engineer the way out of speeding for sure.
Okay.
Make safer streets. That's definitely why the revenues are going to the active transportation projects.
Can you speak to the pros and cons of having a for-profit private contractor do the enforcement of this program versus doing this in-house?
I think that this would be better kept for the upcoming review, this answer to the question, because it is quite complicated. There's a lot to consider. So if it's okay with you, we'll defer to that upcoming report.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I can wait for that answer, certainly. I think that I'll pass the mic at that time. Thank you.
I had a question around that 70-30 split, non-resident to resident. I mean, when I look at these numbers, and that tells me that we're having an impact on resident behavior, given that, you know, we are a municipality of 16,000 people, and it's mostly non-residents that are being ticketed. Do you have any thoughts, or have you given some thought to how we can increase the message out to visitors? Because of course our goal is safety, and how we can maybe get them more cognizant that, their vacation may just have gotten a little bit more expensive.
Yeah. Well, provincially, there are changes to the automated traffic enforcement program that will require the automated traffic enforcement vehicle to have better signage, so it will be a lot more visible. So those changes are coming into effect later this year. I think we can work on some community messaging with our partners in the RCMP and have more visibility, have better messaging as to what the speed limit is. We do have all the appropriate signage, but when you're new in town, you are distracted. It's easy to maybe miss a sign. So we can work, I guess, with Ryan and our Staff Sergeant Singleton here and see if we can come up with some creative ideas.
I wonder if even through some of the business associations and whatnot, you know, because it doesn't make anybody feel good when they get a ticket later. And so just, you know, hey, come and be safe. And, you know, make sure you're watching for the speed limits because there's animals, there's children and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. Quick question back to like the percentage of time spent in locations with the playground zones being 40% and the other speed zones 60%. Is that number self-reported by the contractor, ATE?
It is, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that because just anecdotally, I spend a lot of time dropping off 2 kids through various playground zones, and I swear I've never seen an ATE vehicle in there. Okay, but thank you. Just curious.
You will now because they're going to be more visible.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Councillor Graham?
Thanks. I'm going to be with Mr. Ma. I live in a playground zone, and for 2.5 years and have not seen our contractor in that location. Anecdotally, there is a Facebook group that I went back and had a look at, and only 2 reports in the last 6 months were of the contractor being in a playground or school zone. So I look forward to seeing the stats on that number, certainly. I wonder if you could talk to fixed location photo radar versus variable location photo radar, or maybe that's coming up in your future report as well. I just thought I'd ask that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there are some new provincial regulations around fixed location photo radar, and we are unable to put any new locations in, but I will certainly address it in the upcoming report.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I might have a question that you might be addressing in your upcoming report. And it's funny because, right, we're talking about this right now, so we're so excited to learn more. But are there other changes coming to the provincial legislation in 2022 that would be good to know now in terms of how it might change the delivery of the service?
So the province is currently undergoing some engagement with stakeholders, and there was an announcement that was supposed to come out on February 1st with some changes that have been delayed. So we're waiting for the province to officially make those changes in their finalized form, and then we can bring them forward.
We won't steal their thunder here. Thanks.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you for this report. With regards to the resident versus non-resident, is that trending higher or lower than previous years? Do you have those? Because I can't remember from previous years where we were sitting with that split, so I'm just curious if...
From last year, it's pretty similar. And I might defer to Mr. Burt as to what the trend has been over time.
It's pretty similar. It varies a bit, but overall similar.
Thank you.
So for our viewing at home audience, the answer was very similar. Great. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. I'd actually state from history, I believe it used to be around 50-50 10 years ago. But yeah, so it's trending differently. Could you confirm for me that in concert with the RCMP local detachment, that is how photo radar spots are being chosen? Is that still the case?
Yeah, that's still the case. So all sites do have to be approved by the RCMP detachment commander.
And are those sites generally come recommended by the RCMP?
So currently, we cannot add new sites. So we discuss when we remove sites right now. So, but yes, when we do the reviews of all of the sites, it is both approved and recommended through consultation.
Gotcha. And are we still running about 20 hours per week of photo radar from the contractor? Is that approximately correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's all my
No problem.
questions.
The not adding new sites, is that a temporary measure or
Yeah, with
subject to this review?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Merrow?
Thank you, Ms. Miller, for updating us. I'm just curious, I heard previously this morning that some people, it takes up to 3 weeks to get their ticket. Is there any way, or anyone looking at getting people, if you get your ticket like a week and then you go, oh, it's a quicker response time for getting your ticket? I know mail and there's different things involved. Any thoughts?
There may be some upcoming changes with the,
Okay,
yeah,
I'll stick to that. We'll wait for the report. Thank you, like everyone else. Thank you.
right?
Yeah.
It would be fantastic. I'm just waiting for the
There you go.
changes to be finalized and, yeah.
When you're preparing that report, you can go back and watch this video. Oh, they have all these questions, and so there you go. Perfect, thank you.
Exactly. It'll be good homework.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
I don't see any further questions, so thank you very much for the report on the automated traffic enforcement.
Perfect. I'll turn it over to Staff Sergeant Singleton now.
Staff Sergeant, welcome.
Thank you very much. I have to apologize. I'm having
and
some
Sergeant.
technical difficulties. I'm still receiving calls on my cell phone, so I apologize for that. So with me here, yes, exactly. With me is Sergeant Jack Robles, so he's our operations NCO. Some met him this morning. So Jack comes to us. He used to be here about 8 years ago. He was stationed here, so his mom lives in town. He's building here in town, so he brings a wealth of knowledge to us and familiarity to us here. So I'm not going to bore you a lot with our community detailed policing report, but I'll kind of go over some quick snapshots for you. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. So as you heard, we're currently staffed with 28 RCMP resources here in town. That includes provincial and municipal employees. 23 of those are actually responding members. So we have 23 available resources to respond to calls. That also includes management positions for that. So like many communities and organizations and business owners, COVID has affected us. I have yet to see a full complement of resources. As you may or may not be aware, I think we talked about it last year, if a member is off for more than 28 days, they do then come off our billing process for billing hours, as well as we have 4 of those resources are provincially funded positions. So how I run our operations is just because you're a provincial member or a municipal member, we police the whole community. That includes the MD of Bighorn, and it just allows for quicker response times and more officer safety and presence and visibility within our communities. I think you'll see, and you've seen, and hopefully hearing from your residents, one of my key points is to try to have that visibility out there. If you're a criminal, I want you seeing police cars in this community. Go somewhere else, right? So this year has been challenging. Really, the last 4 months has been some of the most challenging times I've seen in my 20-plus years of policing with resources, the type of crime. I think it was a little better than last year on the people visiting our communities. Overall, Canmore is an extremely safe community. However, crime does plague us. We have seen throughout the year a lot of our crime that is affecting our community is people traveling to our area. So you can never prevent that, but we do our best. And towards the end of this report, you'll see some highlights of some successes that we've had. We couldn't prevent everything, but by some of our successes, I'm a firm believer that we have prevented a lot of other criminality in our communities. So the crime stats, when you look at them, crime stats can be misleading in some ways. As that it does take a snapshot, but there's really reporting criteria and how is that crime being reported, and sometimes that's subjective. What I can say, some of our break and enters, and again, I have to preference that we are an extremely safe community. So when we see increases of 6, 12, 15%, sometimes that's only one call, right? So we have to kind of reflect that. Some of the concerning areas, we want people feeling safe in our communities, and we want people feeling safe at home. So we have seen an uptake in some of our break and enters. We have seen an uptake in some of our commercial break and enters. We've seen some businesses being targeted multiple times. We are making good inroads. We have had success in arresting and disrupting these criminal organizations or groups. Typically, we're finding 1 or 2 or 3 people traveling out here committing the crimes. They're typically hitting multiple locations and multiple locations in other communities, so we can kind of track it. So we have very good working relationships with our surrounding attachments, being Canmore, Lake Louise, Cochrane, as well as very strong relationships with the Calgary Police Service. We have crime analysts that we work with. We get information out through our Intellex and our forensic identification people looking for clothing, descriptors, tattoos, maybe vehicles, and we share that information on a bi-weekly basis to really try to track, and we've had very, very good success with some of those things. Theft from motor vehicles, still a problem in our community. Don't want to blame residents, but if we start locking our vehicles and focusing on some crime prevention techniques, it would go a long way. But again, people feel safe, and that's what we want. We want people feeling safe in our community, right? We've had some very good success stories with break and enters, as well as with these stolen vehicles. People will typically come here, they'll steal a vehicle or two. We typically find them within a week or two. Sometimes we're finding them locally, sometimes we're finding them in other communities, but vast majority of the time they're associated to other crimes. Our mischief calls have increased as well. So some of that has to do with some of our rental properties. It's also scored as a cause disturbance, someone's unlawful enjoyment of their properties being affected. So the mischief is high. Anytime I see a 16% increase, I kind of question, okay, is this a real issue, a concern? Why is this? Really with the mischief, it's how we're capturing that call. Is it a bylaw? Is it a cause disturbance? Typically what we're finding, it's party locations. So people being disturbed by noise or drinking, some vandalism. I don't think it's a big surprise to see some of our mental health calls increasing, and that is a concern. There's a lot of people that have been affected by COVID. There's a lot of mental illness. There's a lot of substance abuse increases. Towards the end of the report as well, I talked about the Regional Police Crisis Team. So that's our RPAC team. So as of March 7th, the RPAC team went active, and they're based out of Cochrane, and it's a specialized or specially trained RCMP officer, so a constable that drives around with a medically trained psychologist or a forensic nurse or psychologist. In Cochrane, it's a forensically trained nurse, and they have access to, first off, they can monitor all our calls. We have access, we can make a phone call to them, and they can do an assessment. So in policing, like many things, it's all based on risk assessments. So if we have a call for or someone that's suffering from a mental episode or a psychiatric episode, they can give us advice. If they're here, they can actually attend the location. They're not wearing a uniform, the trained nurse. It says RPAC on it. They can access their medical information. They don't share it with us, but they can access medical information to see who is this person being treated by. Are they under any medications? They have a quick resource to make a referral as well, and then they can do follow-up. So it's really going to be a game changer for us in how we interact with people, and really having that expert resource that we can say, hey, we're going to this call, can you help us with it? Like last week, we already, it was Tuesday or Wednesday last week, we already phoned them, right? Second day on, we phoned them already. So we're utilizing them. The other advantage is I'm going to be able to send some of my members to go work with them to get that specialized training as well, and then they can be a really good resource. So I think overall, Canmore, RCMP, I think we're pretty good at using our de-escalation tools, reaching out to our resources, so it's really going to be a huge benefit having this unit on here. And you can see we need it. We have quite a high mental health rate. False alarm calls, you know, you're never going to prevent that. Luckily, we're resourced fairly well, so we can have quick reactions to businesses with alarms calls. It is high, it's 20% increase. However, it can be expected, right? These kind of go up and down. The police visibility and patrols, I'm really hoping that you're seeing an increase in our policing presence in the community, as well as when we kind of see these peaks, or we see some break and enters happening around our surrounding communities, and we see them. I talked this morning about some of the proactive stuff we've done with our businesses, as well as our pharmacies. We're going to make a lot of patrols in those areas. Again, at the end of the report, you'll see that we were actually doing some surveillance on some targets. I'm a firm believer that we stopped them before they broke into other businesses, and we found a lot of stolen vehicle parts and property in these vehicles, some of which the stores hadn't even realized was stolen yet. So anytime I can phone a store and return some thousands of dollars worth of property, it's a win for us. So yeah, business thefts, break and enters, a concern. We did a presentation earlier with the Bow Valley Chamber of Commerce. We're really going to try to expand on some of these education pieces and really talk about what the trends are so they can be aware of it moving forward. If you see someone approaching the till asking you lots of questions or asking to see your ATM or your transaction machine, we can tell them that's a red flag. Well, watch out, because they're trying to reprogram it and do things like that. So we talked about some of our accidents, so and that correlates directly with the automated traffic enforcement. So when we're targeting locations or talking about things, we're really using statistics to where do we need to reduce personal injuries, property damage, or offenses being committed. So we're not just going to target one location. We're really using our statistics to try to guide us on where we're doing this. And honestly, when we talk about the drivers or the people using the equipment, they're out there constantly. I can say that I've been following buses around town in a marked PC. I can't issue tickets, I can't remember how to do it, but at least I can drive a police car, and the general public might be confused and think I can't do it, right? So I have gone through school zones. I've seen photo radar vehicles out there. I can attest to the fact some of my police cars have received photo radar tickets as well. So they are out there, they're doing it, but those are kind of our stats. Town traffic, we do utilize the Bow Valley Traffic Unit, so we have a very good relationship. So there are integrated traffic unit. They're based out of Banff, but they're here. We're very fortunate that two of our previous members from Canmore Detachment are on that unit. They live in town, so they patrol. So we do a lot of joint projects together. It's very difficult for me to, if I'm short 2 or 3 members, it's very difficult for me to send out one member to do traffic, because then they have to respond to calls. But it's very easy for me to give one member and then team up with another agency to help do some traffic. So we're doing the road check stops, we're doing joint projects, we're targeting school zones, construction zones where there's a big risk of injury or speeding to try to curb and slow that traffic. So again, very good relationship with our traffic partners. We also have a roving traffic unit, so that's our drug interdiction team. So they're out here quite frequently as well, so they're the ones pulling over the vehicles with obtaining large quantities of illicit drugs and cash and those kind of things. So very good success with that team. Bicycle patrols. So that's a bit of a passion for mine. So that's twofold because it gets my members out and get them healthy and gets them out of their police car and interaction with the community. So bike patrols, I wish we were a little bit better, but last year, but we were affected by COVID and resourcing levels. But I can say that we did send out our bicycles quite a few times. Last year, we actually purchased some more bicycles, more up-to-date bicycles. To do that with Greg's crew, we teamed up with them. Again, it's easier if I can give one resource and he can give one resource and team up. Very good success and a lot of really good public acknowledgement of seeing our members driving bikes down trailheads and just even walking downtown. So that's something I'd really like to encourage our members to do. I talked about our staffing levels. So we were able to keep 24-hour policing going this year. Our overtime budget was affected by it, but we really tried to redeploy resources and work better. I came in early. Jax helped with calls as well, so we tried to really balance what we were doing, and we were also able to help some of our other surrounding communities. So it's not just us; it's Morley, it's Cochrane, it's Banff, where we've been helping them with calls because sometimes there's no one to respond to those calls. So we've been very fortunate to kind of keep that those resource levels at where they're at. Despite our challenges. Our municipal employees, our support staff, they are back to work now. So there's a period of time where we're working from home, or they were working from home and 2 in and 2 out. So we really changed how we did our policing. So our online criminal records, our online reporting of accidents, we're kind of streamlining and bringing that back into the detachment now. But they were a huge part of our success this year, and we're starting to see our criminal records starting to increase, which is a good thing because that means community members are back into soccer and baseball and doing hockey and some of these events. So our general investigation section, so that's 2 positions, and they kind of assist with big interviews or more complex investigations or serious crimes. So when we talk about crime reduction, they're the ones that are going to the jails and interviewing people that have been arrested. We're saying if you come back in our community, we're going to be surveilling you. We're going to be following you. If you're on parole or probation, we're going to come to your house to check on you. Sorry. We're going to come and check on you to make sure you're going to be successful, and we're going to ask you, okay, why were you offending? Is it alcohol? Is it employment? Is it drug related? And we're going to try to give them every tool possible not to go back down that path. So, and we've had very good success. We've had some people decide to move out of the community because we're checking in on them all the time. And some view that as a win. So, and then some of our success stories. So some of our prolific offenders, like we've recovered tons of stolen bikes this year. We've surveilled people, found them in stolen vehicles, took them to safe locations. We're getting them off the road before they tried to take off on us. We had an incident a couple weeks ago where we followed the vehicle and we said, okay, we can't stop them here because they're going to take off on us. So we followed them to a safe location, kind of box them in. Sure enough, they tried hitting us, right? So if we would have tried doing that stop, it would have put everyone on the road at risk. Tons of stolen items in the vehicle, 30-something plus arrest warrants for them. So very active in southern Alberta criminally. And then again, some of the stores returning stolen property, finding jackets, clothing, electronics before the stores even knew it was done. And then we will go in, we'll interview those people, and then some of these investigations have gone into bigger investigations with the Calgary Police Service where we've executed warrants and found, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of stolen items in it. So the vast majority of the people committing crimes here are people traveling here to commit those crimes. And they view it as easy targets. So our job is to work with those businesses and homeowners that try to target harden their businesses and residences. So, yeah. Victim Services, we worked very closely with Bow Valley Victim Services. We partnered with them with our positive ticketing initiative as well, where we're trying to go out in the community and positively engage and change behaviors by giving tickets, coupons for local businesses, to create a positive environment and reward positive behaviors for that. So Bow Valley Victim Services and local businesses really helped us, but here they've assisted us under COVID times with over 382 new files. So a lot of those contacts were done over the phone. We are going to transition to home visits, and it's absolutely amazing the positive feedback we get, and something that we think might be minor, some people it's life-changing for them, right? So we try to do a proactive referral for any police interactions that we have with the public. So they're working extremely hard, and they're a humongous resource to us. Search and rescue, again, we have very good relationships with Canmore Fire Rescue, Cochrane Search and Rescue, and our Kananaskis Public Safety crew. Probably at least once a week. That phone call was from one of the rescue guys right there. So we stay in contact with them quite frequently, and it's amazing that work they do. We ran a fairly large mock scenario a couple weeks ago here in town with the Cochrane Search and Rescue. We've had some very good successes where, you know, we found people over 20 kilometers away from where we believe they were to be with some pretty at-risk medical profiles. So another couple hours, it might have been a difference, right? It might have been a recovery versus a search. So yeah, our crime reduction team too. Our general investigation section is kind of a hybrid of a crime reduction unit, but there are provincial resources that we pipe into for some of our prolific offenders or drug projects that we're working on. There are extra resources that cost us no money to bring in 3 or 4 or 5 bodies to help us with some of these investigations. And policing has changed dramatically over the last 15 or 20 years. So a lot of these are very time sensitive investigations, and our old traditional ways of doing things just don't work anymore. So a lot of it has to do with, you know, following people, doing surveillance, lots of search warrants, lots of follow-up. So they're very complex and time consuming now. And then again, it's just that final piece was with our RPAC team. So our crisis team, that's a huge, huge success. And we've been pushing for this for years and years. So it was nice to see some funding put in place for that. And then our school liaison program. So right now, what we've done is every member in the Canmore RCMP detachment has a designated school. COVID has changed how we can interact with our schools, going into the schools. So we call it a safe school program, where we go and we do a risk assessments on the school, we do school lockdowns and drills. And really, I always say that we spend a tremendous amount of money in schools on fire safety. And when we look around, how many fires have we had in schools? And I hate to say it, but how many firearms incidents have we had in schools? Right, so it's very difficult to change the perspective because, again, we're armed police officers, our reputation isn't always there, but the more positive interactions we can have with school boards, with the counselors, it's going to be beneficial. So we like going in there, doing some lockdown drills. What is a medical? What is a school lockdown? If we have an active shooter in the area, what does a lockdown look like for your school? And then even just going in and having conversations with kids and running different programs in the schools where we talked about alcohol, tobacco, vaping, some of the risks, and bringing some resources into them to help. And one of the things I really want to do again this year is to do some bike safety, so some bike rodeos, and get more involved and do some sporting events and stuff with some of these kids. And that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, fantastic. I really appreciate the detailed report and with excellent information. Councillor McCallum, you have a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for your presentation, and I'm sorry I missed your tour. Councillor Faubert handed this to me, so it's beautiful. But I apologize because I really wanted to go on it. My question has to do with the drug addicted. I'm curious as to how many interactions the RCMP are seeing in our community with those that are on, like, a drug-afflicted people. And in particular, I'm assuming that all members carry naloxone with them in their cruisers or in their backpacks or whatever.
Yeah, so actually this morning, we had some of the councillors in the mayor come do a tour of the detachment. You're always welcome. Phone me tomorrow. We'll get her done. And most members carry at least 2 Narcan packs on their vest. Some of the issues we're seeing now, and I went over it this morning, definitely an increase in fentanyl, carfentanil, some of the illicit drugs, crystal meth, cocaine, and marijuana. So we just don't know anymore on sometimes what we're dealing with, and they call it drug poisonings. So many of these drugs are being laced with other substances, and we're not chemists, we're not experts on this field, so we just don't know. So our members carry it for their own personal protection as well as for that of the public. And a couple of weeks ago, we had possible cross-contamination with fentanyl. So it is very close to home. It is a reality of policing in 2020. We have some very good supports. We really work with our partner agencies, with Alberta Health Services. Again, Canmore is a very safe community.
Absolutely.
So,
I go to conferences, I preach this all the time.
Yeah.
Lowest severe crime rate in the province, from what I understand.
Yes, yeah, and we're still there. We're starting to creep up on certain things, but it's because we're a tourist destination. So tourism is starting to come back here. So we do a ton of referrals. And going back to the RPAC, albeit we're talking about mental health, but there is, not everyone with mental health has drug and alcohol addictions, right? So you have to be careful with that. And then I'm friends with a lot of counselors and psychologists, and it's a challenge because there's not a lot of space. So
I feel like that field almost needs their own counseling. They've seen so much in the last 2 years.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a challenge. We're very much aware of it. I know now with some of the clients that we're bringing to the remand center, they're being offered supports immediately. That doesn't help the so-called non-criminal people that are having interactions with us, that are recreational users or drug addicts, that are suffering from these addictions. But yeah, it is a concern. It's not an over concern here. And most of our members are very well educated and have the resource and referral tools available to them. And again, going back to our victim services, they're very alive to this fact as well. And with our RPAC unit, like, even though it might not be a mental health call, they're a trained nurse. So we're going to use those. What agencies, what referrals are available for you? Some of the addiction houses and treatment centers in Calgary, like, we've driven people there. They can't get there. We give them the offer. We talk to them and say, how can we help you? Sometimes no one's ever asked them.
Well,
right?
And there's no transportation to get in there.
So unfortunately, we've done that.
That's good.
Taken a member out. Will be interesting to see. I think you've heard recently with the announcement of transit going to Morley. It's going to be interesting to see what tools and resources are available for us. Calgary has their DOPE team. So even though they're not part of Canmore, we've had very good success with some of those agencies because Calgary is 1.3, 1.4 million people. They're less than an hour away, right? So these people are traveling here. They're part of our community. They're residents, and we need to do everything we can to support them.
In 2019, I had the privilege of being, and it was open to everybody in the community, and they ran it at Community, where community members could learn about naloxone and and learn how to inject it and learn how you could get it for free, keep it in your car, what conditions to not keep it in your car under or in your trailer or whatever, like it doesn't bode well with lots of heat or lots of cold. And so I know a lot of people in town that carry those in their backpack. You can get them from a pharmacy for just with ID. And I think that even with just a contamination possibility, I think it's valuable we all haul a backpack around anyways, so.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point. So we did a tour of the shelter the other day, and we were talking about that. So what happens if this occurs, right? And we talked about safe storage of drugs and how if they see something, how we can go there, no questions asked, and seize it, and then it transitioned to the safety part. So what are you doing to keep yourself and staff safe?
Right.
And what happens if you bring someone in here, because they don't ask questions. It's a safe place to go. And again, with that, we don't want the police going there because we want it to be a safe place.
Yes.
And we realize the impact that we may have on someone, either positive or negative. So it's having these resources available to us. And I reached out and offered some supports that can help them with training pieces as well.
Great, thanks for your answer. And I will take you up on that. I'll bring the beamers.
Councillor Faubert.
Oh, thank you, Staff Sergeant Singleton, for your time, and Sergeant Robo. There, I got it. I was like, whoa, I'm blanking. It's a bit of a follow-up question to Councillor McCallum's, because, you know, some statistics don't capture everything. Do you keep track of the number of times that the Narcan is used by officers in a year?
Yes, we would do that. We did not have a deployment this year. We might have had one deployment. I don't have that on me right now. But I was just talking to one of my friends in the Okanagan, and they did 7 deployments, one person, right? So the good news is, the bad news is Narcan's very expensive. The good news is every member has it, and it has about a 1-year shelf life. And we're routinely throwing out or donating expired doses. So even if we can donate an expired dose to someone, it's still effective. It might not be as effective, but I'm sure glad I'm not going through empty canisters after empty canisters. And we administer the nasal spray.
Yeah, I just thought, in terms of a number, it would be a good sense of, you know, how often that resource is being used.
Yeah, again, in Canmore, we're very good. The fire and ambulance would probably be better. We do have some cases. But to rewind to your first comment too about the bear interactions. So Fish and Wildlife, we work extremely closely with Fish and Wildlife, and they have all those. I know what the numbers are, but that's for them to speak of. But they do track that. And on a conservation side of things, it's very difficult when they have to relocate bears because their survival rates are quite low.
Well, now you're splitting up my 2 questions, because I still have an overdose question and I have a wildlife question. So have we lost any community members to an overdose death in the last 2 years?
We have,
Yeah?
yes.
Okay. Wildlife? How many times do officers have to use their firearms for elk that are hit on the highway in the Canmore area?
Yeah, I don't have the statistic for that for you, specifically for elk, but we do have to put animals down on a fairly regular basis.
I live in Palliser, so I hear it, and I'm just trying to gather some information around, and I think all of council is. We're interested in this issue. How does the need for that type of response affect your detachment?
Everyone's different. We do have some hunters, but I can say everyone that I work with has a great appreciation for wildlife, and it is difficult, even if you're an avid hunter, because they respect the animals, right? So we just had a newcomer to our detachment within her first week. They had to put down an animal, and yeah, you never want to see that. We try to work with Alberta Parks, Environment, Fish and Wildlife to help out on those things, because most members aren't trained unless they're hunters on how to do that. And so we've worked a lot with Fish and Wildlife over the last year, especially with all the interactions that we had with grizzlies and some of the attacks and bear attacks we had. So we're trying to do more training sessions that teach. Again, we do not necessarily want to trap, but again, I'm starting to go in the fish and wildlife thing. But my knowledge and experience is the last resort is trying to trap. We want to move that animal on and deter it from being in the area. So.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll just say that, yeah, hunters have great respect, or the majority of hunters have great respect for the animals they harvest, and when taking them, it's never an easy thing to do. I speak from experience. But I digress. I wonder if you might help me out with, do we know of the unfortunate fatal motor vehicle accidents and the injuries via motor vehicle? Do we know which of those are attributed to speed?
So on the ATV or AT study, those are going to be more detailed for you.
This is going to be the greatest report of my council career.
They're complicated because there are so many stats in there. So the vast majority of the accidents that we're seeing in town aren't necessarily speed related, but some are. And then again, it's depending on if they're on the highway. Traditionally, it's road conditions or driver behavior.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Seeing no more questions, Staff Sergeant Singleton, Sergeant Goebel, thank you for coming today, and thank you for answering all of our questions and providing a very detailed report. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
And all of your work is very much appreciated. Thanks. Now I'm just looking, we have fire rescue annual report. Are we doing? Oh, there's. Okay, we'll do that and then we'll take a break. Oh, okay. Deputy Chief Mertens, welcome to the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Apologies, I had really hoped to be there in person. Please tell me that that really big screen on the side of the wall is not just my face.
No, just half of it is your face.
Oh, okay, I don't know if that's better, but okay. So we had, hoped to have been able to present to you in person today, but we had one of our day crew firefighters test positive this morning after he came to work. So we decided that joining you in person was probably not the best thing today. So I'll give you the just an updated report. Chief Gaylor, if you remember, had presented most of last year's statistics to you before he left. So we were there in December with you, and he presented most of last year's statistics and accomplishments. So this is really just kind of an update the last month or so of activity that the fire department saw last year. So I'll maybe just hit some highlights, and then if you have any questions about something I may have missed, we can certainly go back to that later on. So we had mentioned that the new rescue truck was in the hall. It is indeed in the hall and ready for service. We are just spending the next couple of training nights doing some training on the equipment that is in it, just giving everybody a refresher for that, as well as doing some driver training, because it does drive a little bit differently than the other trucks that we have in our fleet. Moving down to emergency management, I wanted to update you that the FRIA grant program, as you know, the 2021 program, last time we spoke, in regards to the stats, we're still in the process of waiting to hear. And as you know, we have been awarded that grant to run a full-scale emergency exercise in June, the first weekend in June, actually. So planning for that has begun. And Ms. Miller and I will provide more of an update to the Emergency Management Agency, and we're also happy to bring more of an update to the broader council as we get closer to that exercise taking place. The real big change, I guess, that you'll want to kind of take note of is the calls for service and how things changed in that last month of last year. So overall, numbers did continue to go up as we expect them to. We provided, or Canmore Fire Rescue provided advanced life support intervention services a total of 17 times in 2021, and basic life support services 199 times. And those numbers were slightly up from what we saw at the end of November. Canmore Fire was on scene approximately 65% of the time first over our AHS ambulance. And that average on-scene time was 7.25 minutes. And that was actually, I noticed a typo from the report that was submitted. So in 2021, the total call volume increased over 2020 numbers by 12.5%. And as we expected, our medical call volume continues to rise annually. The on-call or the all-call projections, again, we finished the year 2021 at 745, which gives us a projection of just over 800 calls for the year that we're currently in. 2021 calls by category, the only real difference there was our medical number went up to 43%, as opposed to the 42 that you saw in our last statistics update. The fires by category didn't change from what Chief Gaylor had presented because we didn't have any fires in December. So the only change then would be the medical calls by category, and almost every category increased a little bit. Advanced life support went up by 3 to 17. Basic life support went up by 15 calls to 199. And our counseled en route went up by 7 calls to 46 over the 39. And then the final chart that is there just shows the average time that we report our service on scene prior to EMS. And as I mentioned, that was just over 7 minutes. So really quick update for you from the December stats. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to get answers for those.
Great. Well, thank you for that update. And I'm looking to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Faubert.
I am sorry. Thank you, Deputy Chief Martins. I have a random question.
Okay.
Was the cause of the fire from the summer near Canmore ever determined?
The wildfire, Dead Man's Flats wildfire?
Yes.
Yes, we believe that. So Alberta Forestry, or pardon me, Alberta Wildfire Rural Economic Development did do an investigation, and they determined that it was actually started by sparks off a catalytic converter. So they suspect that as a car was accelerating to get back onto the highway, hot sparks came off the catalytic converter into the dry grass, and that's what started that fire.
And what about the recent structure fire in South Canmore?
That is still officially under investigation, so I can't really speak a whole lot to that. But once that cleared, the investigation is finalized, we can clear that up and get you more information.
It's all good. I thought that my first question wasn't exactly relevant to the stats, but I wanted to know the answer. Thank you.
It's all relevant. It's all good.
And looking one more time, see if there's any questions. And seeing none, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for your discretion in deciding to come visit us by Zoom, and I hope that everyone remains well, and those who have tested positive get better quickly. So,
Yes, thank you. I will certainly pass that along. Thank you.
great, thank you. Okay, we'll now take a, we now have water in the building. We will take a 10-minute break then, and we will return at 5 after 3. Okay. All right, we're back. And we are now going to get an HBO debrief. Ms. Bartolome, welcome to the Committee of the Whole.
Why, thank you. It's such an honor to be here. Mayor Krauser, members of council, oh, can my presentation go up? Because it's no good if I'm pressing buttons and, oh. Oops. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, I'll start again. Mayor Krauser, members of council, on November 2nd, administration provided a verbal update to council regarding the filming of HBO production of The Last of Us that would be filming in Canmore later that month. Following the presentation, council asked that administration report back after a debrief had been completed. That debrief's been done, so here I am. The HBO production was filmed from November 15th to 20th, 2021 on Main Street, the Engine Bridge, 14th Street, and the parking lot beside the Miners Union Hall. There were 6 days of filming, 3,200 hotel room nights were booked, 30 locals were employed by the production company, 100 locals were extras, 235 hours of staff time was allocated to the project, $97,000 was paid to Bow Valley contractors, and $227,000 was the total revenue generated by the production for the town of Canmore. These numbers are a little bit different than you'll see in the briefing report that I wrote because finance corrected my numbers. So here we are. The HBO experience highlighted the need for an update to the current community event policy to address large-scale film permits, including requiring a contract between film companies and the town of Canmore, as well as environmental impact standards and reporting, and an economic impact reporting structure. The experience also highlighted the need for a different approach to ensure timely communication from the town of Canmore to those impacted by production, such as businesses and residents. For this report, feedback was collected from the business improvement area meetings, for social media, town staff, interviews and a survey with downtown businesses, and a request for information from the Canmore Hotel and Lodging Association members. The following information is a result of that input. There was a lot of positive chatter on Facebook with residents reminiscing about past productions filmed in Canmore. Locals and visitors came to see the transformation in downtown and the Engine Bridge while hoping to see actors and filming. Less than 20 complaints were received from residents. Given the size and scope of the production, things went reasonably well. So much credit for this goes to Jordy and the Streets and Roads team. They were organized, responsive, and incredibly supportive throughout the month of setup, filming, and wrap. And Andy from engineering picked up the phone whenever I called, which wasn't always at convenient times, to help me steer through some sticky situations. Many departments supported the production of this event. We were in uncharted waters, and we learned a lot. 2 things that I learned: things don't seem to go as planned, and things change quickly, constantly, and without notice. Staff reported that it would have been helpful to have written clarification about what could be made public, and that more lead time and reasonable timelines would have benefited the flow of information to residents. It was also noted that any concerns or hazards were dealt with quickly by the production company, and equipment, infrastructure, and venues were returned to their pre-production condition. Bylaw Services received 6 calls from the public related to noise, work beginning early, and a call about an ambulance pickup that was handled quickly by our streets team and HBO. The front desk of the Civic Center had less than 10 complaints related to the Main Street closure. Of the 163 businesses that were impacted by filming, 40 provided feedback. Successes included the excitement that the filming generated, the short-term economic gain and the anticipated long-term benefits, the increase in Canmore's global profile, and businesses thought the production crew were friendly and responsive, and overall, businesses found that it was a good learning experience for them as well. Downtown businesses voiced their primary concerns were related to communications, timing, change in scope, and contract negotiations. Most communication with businesses was done through the BIA and the production company. Businesses would like to have seen the town of Canmore take a lead on communication by providing more advance notice of the production as a whole. They were also looking for a single source of up-to-date information and a filming, here's what's happening today, page on the town of Canmore's website. They felt that because of the disruption, many locals weren't coming downtown to shop, and that the messaging to residents indicating that downtown businesses were open and that parking was available would have been helpful. Or of the businesses that responded, 41% felt that the communication was good or excellent, while 14% found it poor and 38% found it fair. Timing was a mixed bag. However, for many businesses, it was a concern. Shoulder season, our slowest time of year, great timing. November, our busiest time of year. We're already staffed up, stocked up, and created a marketing plan. Timing couldn't have been worse. It was very exciting for a town, a great success overall. Tell the film industry Canmore is open for business. Parking is always an issue. Taking away parking spots on any weekend, let alone a long weekend, is not something we can support. I loved the exposure and excitement. It was unbelievable how they transformed downtown. I would not recommend ever closing Main Street again. So, timing was a difficult one. Interestingly though, 54% of businesses said they would be supportive of future filming in Canmore, while just 17% said that they were strongly opposed. No, the other part, where? 29, sorry? No, strongly opposed, 29%, yes, and 17% were neutral. Thank you, Joanna. No, that's great. Of primary concern was the change in scope, or expected disruptions versus reality. As I mentioned, things don't seem to go as planned, and things were changing quickly, constantly, and without notice. In early meetings with HBO, we were told that all businesses would remain open. However, some businesses were asked to close during filming, and others were not reachable because access was only via back entrances, which they did not have. We originally thought only businesses on the 800 block of Main Street and businesses between Main Street and 7th Street would be impacted. What really happened was the 700 block and 800 block of Main Street were impacted, as well as businesses between 9th Street and Main Street and businesses on 8th Avenue between the alleys behind Main and some 7th Avenue businesses. We were told pedestrian traffic would be allowed on Main Street throughout filming with an ambassador escort. The 800 block of Main Street was fenced off and wrapped, so there would be no viewing of filming and no access during filming. The Union Hall parking lot would be impacted for 6 days. Firstly, a larger footprint was required than originally requested, and parking lot closures began a week earlier than expected and lasted 10 days longer. The 10 days longer wasn't entirely HBO's fault. The weather melted, froze, and they had a heck of a time getting everything up. So most of the reopening problem was around weather. Main Street would be closed to vehicle traffic for 6 days. It was closed for 9. Deliveries to downtown businesses would not be impacted. They were, for about 4 days. When they did reach out to us, we were able to work with HBO to have that mitigated, but in the beginning it was difficult. And it was difficult also because the people who would be at barricades who you'd share information with weren't the people who would be at barricades in the next hour, the next 2 hours, so you were constantly checking in to say, hey, if a delivery truck comes, let them through. And I also think it's worth noting that Main Street was virtually a construction zone for an entire month. These changes in scope impacted the negotiation process. HBO negotiated 163 individual contracts with a no one-size-fits-all formula, a huge task while dealing with constantly changing priorities. Businesses did not have all the tools they needed to adequately represent themselves in the negotiation process. They would have benefited from advanced training, access to legal coaching, and an individual or entity advocating on their behalf. Businesses would like to have seen clear guidelines to better understand how compensation works and a comprehensive grid for like businesses. Businesses had many suggestions, and I'm just going to give you the high-level ones here. While some businesses called for negotiation and reimbursement transparency, others felt that the signing of non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, would keep negotiations and agreements confidential. Businesses also felt that if they did sign an NDA, they could be made privy to essential information sooner. Rather than using the BIA as a conduit for information flow, businesses would like to have seen early engagement and ongoing communication from the town of Canmore. Businesses as a whole would like to have received compensation reflective of the entire disruption time given the lower sales throughout the period. Most businesses would have appreciated comprehensive negotiation guidelines with an opportunity to renegotiate if there was a change in scope. Several businesses would like the film industry to know that Canmore is open for business and also feel that filming will impact tourism positively. And although HBO provided a green plan that set a 75% waste diversion target, the Canmore community was unaware of it, and concerns were raised about items they thought were going to the landfill. Because of this, environmental stewardship was high on the list of concerns for businesses and residents, and stricter guidelines were suggested. Specific concerns raised were around carbon emissions and recycling. HBO indicated that they purchase carbon offsets, recycle and reuse set pieces, props, and furniture, and use recycled lumber and reuse where possible. What does go to waste is responsibly disposed or it is donated. It will be important that the town create clear expectations and communicate that processes are in place to the public in the future. Other things that were suggestions were consider time of year, the location, think about legacy projects, ambassador training, downtown modifications were also suggested. 6 hotels responded with feedback ranging from no impact to significant positive impact. As I said earlier, there were 3,200 room nights in Canmore in November of 2021 that were booked by HBO, reportedly booked by HBO. In November of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions and travel uncertainties negatively impacted group bookings for Canmore hotels. The reports we received from hotels indicate the group bookings on behalf of HBO have helped to stimulate the economic recovery of the hospitality industry. Impacts were seen in food service and leisure dining, overnight stays, and conference room and meeting room bookings. Since writing this report, I have received further financial information from the production company regarding the dollars spent in Canmore. The locations department alone spent $1 million in Canmore. This was spent on inconvenience and location fees to businesses and residents, loss of business buyouts, expenses associated with extras and the crew. As for food and beverage money spent in Canmore, it is estimated that $373,750 were spent. This was calculated as each person received a $65 per day per diem that they did need to provide receipts for. So we do know that if they were given $65, they were spending it because that's the only way they could get their cash. 150 people for 30 days and 250 extra people for 5 of those days. So those were the filming days. Hotel and lodging, 3,200 room nights, $410,000. Fuel, materials, equipment, rental, and other miscellaneous expenses is unknown and will likely remain unknown because those expenses have been grouped together with other expenses from neighboring communities, so it'll be hard to tease out the Canmore numbers from that. The financial impact to the town of Canmore. So again, these numbers will be a little different because finance corrected me. The total amount billed to HBO was $324,920.29. Of that, $161,555 were location fees and parking stall fees. Staff time, including administration fees, $58,300, and permitting fees and miscellaneous expenses, $7,864.05. So the subtotal, or revenue to the town of Canmore, is $227,719.05. The town of Canmore was billed for contractor services, and then we rebilled HBO. The cost of that was $97,201.24. That's people like Bocor Excavating, Standish Towing, policing, those types of things are captured in that number. This was a lot of information to distill, and again, I want to highlight what a great learning experience it was. The next steps are a result of this learning. We will set up a debrief meeting with the Communications Department to review business feedback in March of 2022, so this month. We'll conduct a document review of other municipal film policies, procedural documents, and contract templates in the second quarter of 2022. And we'll create a contract template in the second quarter of 22. The HBO series The Last of Us highlighted the need for a contract between the production company and the town of Canmore, something that would be more clearly articulate the roles and responsibilities of each party, a fee structure and a payment schedule. A production schedule would speak to the scope of work, production delays, construction safety, and cleanup. It would also be helpful to have a non-disclosure agreement in place so town administration could better understand what was confidential in nature. We will bring to council a revised community event policy that addresses large-scale film permits in the third quarter of 2022, and we'll create a procedural document and any templates needed for the film permitting process in the third quarter of 2022 as well. So that is my debrief presentation, and do you have any questions?
A very thorough debrief and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big project and a lot of compact learning.
For sure.
So I'm looking forward to those things coming back to council, and thank you for laying out all of the benefits and all of the concerns as well as the next steps. So looking to Councillor Faubert for a question.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bartolome, for your presentation and all your hard work. Has HBO indicated that they'd like to film another episode here at all?
They haven't to date. I haven't heard from them, so no, but we have had other film companies approaching us about filming in Canmore, but not HBO right now. I don't know if they've started thinking about their second season for The Last of Us, and if they have, where they're going to be filming it.
So are we seeing more interest in filming here as a result of HBO?
I don't think it's as a result of HBO. I think it's more a result of the tax incentives offered by the Alberta government. It's just cheaper to work here.
Awesome. And then, so if, as a result of this process, or this experience, we're going to create a more robust process for handling
We
these
will
situations.
indeed. So what I find with events as a whole is that historically, I've always known the questions to ask. I haven't always known the answers, but I've known at least what the question was that could get me to the answer I needed. During the HBO experience, it was like, crap, I don't even know what to ask these people. But now I at least know the questions to ask to move us a little further. Because when HBO came, we didn't believe that it would be such a huge production, and it was way bigger than we expected, and the questions were numerous, and learning was rapid. So yes, this will inform that, and hopefully because of this, other people will come.
I think it was referred to earlier this meeting that former Chief Gawler often says we are building the plane while we fly it.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for all that work.
Thank you.
So interesting to note that what I take from this report is that there was a significant economic impact, that while there's some concerns to work on, there was, of the downtown businesses, 70% were either in favor of it happening again or neutral. And for like something like this, and we didn't have the processes in place and all the things to improve, that's a pretty good number considering, right? And that there was a lot of positive feedback combined with some negative as well. And so there's room for improvement, but there was also a lot of benefits. Councillor Ma.
Thanks so much, Ms. Bartolome. Moving forward for future productions, will TOC have some sort of green expectations laid forth for production companies? Like, I know when I was teaching at the yoga lounge, I was looking out the front window, and they're packing up, and there's all this wood that was getting put out on the street, and it was getting pushed into dumpsters, and everyone's like, is that just going to the dump? Is that going somewhere else? And yeah, is that the sort of stuff we can promote with future productions?
Absolutely. So HBO does have a 75% diversion rate or guideline. That's what they're to work to. With Town of Canmore events, we've asked for 80%, and we hope that people are going to reach that. We realize that it's going to be incremental and some people getting to that spot, but that's what we're striving for, is an 80% diversion from the landfill. I would say that even though it was going into dumpsters here, it was being taken over to the lot beside the Ford dealership and being separated there. So while it looked like things were going into dumpsters, because indeed they were, they weren't going to the landfill.
To the dump,
They
right.
were going to this lot where things were being separated and taken other places. So 80% is what we strive for. 75% seems more of an industry standard, but with events, we've always tried to get them up to 80. And truly, like the Canmore Folk Festival has been the group that's got up to 92% and maybe even higher. So they've been the leaders in Canmore for some time. So
Yeah.
we know
And-
it can be done.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say it was a really hectic time, and you did great. It was
Thank you.
bonkers. So good job.
Thanks, Councillor Ma.
And I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much for that report today, Ms. Bartolome.
Thank you.
Mr. Asarte, I think you're next up with items D4 and 5. So D4 is the transportation introduction.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Good, you can see it. I'm here today with Trevor Reeder. Trevor's with us virtually via Zoom.
I was thinking you have an imaginary friend here.
Yeah. He's here, I hope. So, yep. Trevor's joined us as a project engineer on a term. He's helping out with a number of capital projects, including the West Bow River Pathway Project. He'll follow up this presentation with one of his own. Okay, for this presentation, I've organized information in a way that frames work within our strategic plans. I'll reference back to vision and goals of our plans, strategies to accomplish those goals, and from there then discuss a number of 2022 projects and initiatives, as well as several that are under consideration for the future. I have about 15 or 20 minutes for this intro, so it's really just a quick touch on several topical items. However, this is a framework we can use going forward to link transportation work, parking work to initiatives to our guiding documents, including the work that Council is doing right now on strategic planning. The Integrated Transportation Plan and Integrated Parking Management Plan, they've been developed specifically for Canmore based on the MDP, as we've discussed before. There are a number of recommended policies, strategies, projects, and initiatives in the plans with goals towards having a functional network. Within those plans, there's also consideration for impacts, both positive and negative, on people and the community. And this makes the document somewhat unique in that traditional plans consider largely functional network requirements for driving. And in these presentations to ground the plans, I generally focus pretty heavily on the functional side of the strategy. I reference these slides that look to how in the future we can manage a seemingly unmanageable volume of traffic that's projected to come, to have 15% parking available at all times, The plans focus on the need to avoid short-term fixes that exacerbate our long-term congestion challenge. Like most transportation plans, these functional requirements are put forward as the foundational goals, the what of our plan, what we're doing. And around these goals, all other goals around people and community and place tend to be subordinate. In some respects, those things are considered to be a bonus of our strategies, that they also make our streets safer and more inclusive. They also protect our environment. They also improve affordability. This is going to be the challenging part with this presentation. I've got to find this little up arrow a few times. And so with this approach, we've yielded successes. We saw a high growth rate of transit ridership with fare-free transit pre-pandemic. We've seen a growing share of walk and cycle trips on our network. Our capacity to move people is increasing. However, over time, we're seeing that the secondary goals around people and place are actually shifting to the forefront. We're seeing a growing demand for roads that are safe and accessible, and that safety concerns are limiting, to some extent, where and how often people will walk and bicycle, for example. We have a multi-year backlog of safety and traffic calming projects at the time. We're seeing a desire for affordable transportation, and that has people considering scooters and e-bikes as alternatives to driving. By focusing on people in our transportation system, and in turn on our community, in turn our community is more inclusive and equitable. I'll provide an example with affordability. Finances right now are being stretched. Everything's getting more expensive, cars and gas in particular. And so this is a timely example. So transportation, it's our second largest household expenditure in Canada after housing. Driving personal vehicles makes up the bulk of this cost. It's the most expensive form of transportation, and for many people in many places, it's really the only practical option available. And so when we look at a two-car household, unless we're using our vehicle as a taxi or courier service, we're not using the vehicles full time. And there are times when we need both of those vehicles, but a large part of the time we don't. So if we provide sufficient options and alternatives for those limited times where two vehicles are needed, we can see families become one-car families. And I think we all know people who've been able to do this over recent years. And the math on that's pretty powerful. Even factoring in additional kilometers on a primary vehicle, costs for transit, bicycles, costs for taxi or car rental when it's needed, savings of thousands of dollars per year can be realized. And this is for a used compact SUV, late model, very typical household car, and that's based on AMA's online calculator for Alberta. I don't know if they keep gas prices up to date, but probably higher than this today. And if we can create similar conditions for a single car household, say for a young employee in town, a youth in town, to be able to make use of, say, car share or other travel options, they can see similar savings. And for a household like that, the impact can be even more positive relative to income. So only really Vital Homes, a program aimed at our number one household cost, the household itself, can offer families similar affordability savings. And with transportation, this is something everybody in the community can benefit from. Lastly, our transportation strategy and vision aligns with our sense of place, consideration of local and global environmental impacts, climate change, open spaces and trails, and noise pollution all those topics are on the forefront. So to summarize, our goals have centered on function. How do we move cars around? How do we park them? We have had strategies that have aligned with our community values with respect to people in place. Going forward, we're seeing this shift towards emphasizing goals centered on people in place, and that's taking place. The transportation plans that Council and administration have put in place over the last 10 years have set us up for this shift, really in a good place to make that transition. And the groundwork has been laid for us to be able to move forward with Council's strategic direction along those lines. So a shift towards goals centered on people in place, this isn't going to negatively impact function, and that's potentially a concern. I actually think it's a little bit of the opposite. If we keep focusing primarily on vehicle flow, parking, and don't emphasize and raise up the goals around safe streets, for example, making every residential street safe for people of all ages and abilities, connecting up neighborhoods via pathways to destinations, emphasizing those aspects of the plans rather than traffic flow or some arbitrary mode shift number. Rather that shift negatively impacting, I think it's really a shift that needs to take place in order for us to ultimately be successful in encouraging those really high numbers of people to go out and select alternative modes. So getting transit service available so people can drop one of those cars. Okay. I'm going to shift now to strategies. So there's no single strategy that works in isolation. Really, we're looking at a combination of a number of different strategies. This isn't an exhaustive list. And they all work together towards larger goals. By looking at it in this context, we can pursue projects and initiatives that are effective, complementary. So I'll start with safety and accessibility improvements. This year is a light year for projects, actually, after I said all that about making our streets safe. We are catching up on a project backlog and impacts from COVID and have limited resourcing to tackle a quite long priority list. So projects that are lined up for this year, it includes an interesting project at Hawks Bend. This is a pilot project to use relatively inexpensive precast elements with signage and planters to create a traffic calming effect in an area with a large number of children playing between homes and parks and playgrounds across the street with parking blocking sight lines. And though most people drive slowly on the street, we have this mismatch of speeds that create these rare but highly risky conflicts that would be addressed through this project. So this will result in information that could potentially be applied to other neighborhoods as we look at addressing neighborhood traffic speeds. 3 other smaller projects that will be completed as well, and next year we can review opportunities to catch up on the backlog of priorities. Moving on to complete street improvements. This is largely a planning and design year. Several projects will be before council this spring for information purposes ahead of progressing detailed design. Functional planning, that's an early stage of work. It assesses current and future needs for a project, how a project will connect to the community, how many people are expected to use it today and in the future, and make recommendations for the types of facilities that should be constructed to meet those needs. Concept design then builds on that functional planning and applies it to the local context, produces potentially a number of options that are evaluated that can come with cost estimates and an understanding of impact to stakeholders. So functional planning and concept design for the West Boat River Pathway will be presented today. We'll get a chance to look at the project scope and schedule. Next committee of the whole will look at functional planning for Elk Run Boulevard and Glacier Drive, another area we're focusing on based on rehabilitation and utility needs, as well as some need to better connect that neighborhood. That will be followed shortly by an overview of functional planning and concepts for Teepee Town, Bow Valley Trail, and the Palliser pedestrian crossing, and that's all work that's been in place based on a capital project from several years ago. Okay. Intercept parking. This is something we've been discussing. It's a strategy that's often considered something of a magic bullet, a must-have. Land is expensive. We have 2 capital projects right now to look at opportunities for this, for Canmore. The reality is land's expensive. It's really limited. Building and maintaining parking is expensive. We'll see some numbers coming out of the pay parking program where we're actually quantifying how much a parking stall costs. And finding a location that both doesn't generate extra traffic in the core and is something that people will use may not actually be reasonably feasible. So for a moment, we'll put that aside as the magic bullet and consider intercept parking strategy already at work, and presents what I think is actually a pretty large opportunity for us. So I've touched on visitor accommodation and close walking distance to the core. We've got 2,500 plus prime stalls where they're already parked there, and they don't need to be moved. So encouraging even a small percentage of guests that have either just checked in or even checked out to leave their cars behind, that can easily provide the equivalent of an intercept parking lot worth of benefit. Based on the numbers we're crunching, a conservative estimate of a 250 stall intercept lot is it would cost us annualized nearly $800,000. And that considers land, construction, operation, maintenance costs. So while intercept parking in itself has little alignment with our place and people goals, like build a parking lot, now you've got a bunch of cars driving in and out, it doesn't really add to the community apart from providing that bit of relief during peak travel times. This idea aligns with really all of our larger transportation and community goals. And so how do we encourage it? Pay parking in the town center and Quarry Lake, that's an excellent start. It's an important step in reducing the high subsidies we have right now for driving. Then we connect visitors with destinations. So new pathways and sidewalks connecting Spring Creek Mountain Village and Bow Valley Trail are already providing accommodation for walking. We're seeing hotel bike share springing up, and bike rental is growing. E-scooters are proving to be a highly effective way to enable short trips, and lots of people are seeing success. Lots of communities in Alberta, in fact, would likely be about the 10th community to consider this. Increasing these programs, they come at very little cost, but allow people to reach further destinations. A new seasonal transit service will connect up visitor areas with the town center, Quarry Lake, CNC, Grassy Lakes. So these are lower cost options. They build on the investments we've already made. Can we get 10% of these cars to stay situated? Can we get more than that and have a similar impact to an intercept lot? Just touch that any investment we make in education and promotion on any of our strategies usually has a multifold return on that investment. So certainly partnering with the hotel associations and tourist organizations to promote these options is something that can really maximize that benefit. All right, lastly, transit. So council can expect to see 8 bus stops with concrete pad improvements, better access, furnishings. Those stops, along with a number of others, will see shelters for a total of 16 stops with shelters added this year. We do have a backlog of bus stop improvements, so we have a placeholder project for 2023 for more bus stops, as well as plans coming together for bus stop improvements associated with the new Quarry Lake route. Council has approved additional service hours for the local route, so this has allowed Rome to make changes to the route and timing to improve service. Rome is moving forward with splitting the local route. Currently, it operates in basically a figure-8, a long single route that's serviced by 2 buses. So they will split that, and that, with the additional service hours, has allowed them to create these 2 unique legs. This is going to allow for better on-time service, allows for more time to be provided to the Kruger Creek side where there can be delays from traffic or trains. And so a lot of the delays have come from not being able to catch up from that side. So by providing more time for that side, they'll improve on-time service and then connect up with regional route more consistently. So the idea is all 3 buses will be in the town center at the same time. So it does introduce the need for transfers for cross-valley travel. However, the improved reliability is going to offset this inconvenience. Currently, the number of cross-valley passengers is about 15%. Together with this, route planning for Quarry Lake is underway. That will be a topic for a future committee of the whole meeting. So I'll end with a bit of transit data. The regional route is trending towards recovery. We're seeing a good uptick recently with big gains year over year and a positive trend. We're still a ways below pre-pandemic levels. So this is current here, and this is pre-pandemic with the drop. And then the local route has seen similar positive gains. Ridership's now above 2019. So this was pre-fare free, pre-pandemic, and is trending to, in turn, provide our highest ridership March and April, which is a good sign. Ridership increased beyond that due to fare free. So hopefully, you know, it's a mix of recovery and growth, and we can start to get back up to those levels on the local route. So that concludes the presentation. I'll open up for any questions that council might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarte. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Sarte, for that presentation. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on what we might do to help hotels promote cars staying there. Yeah, any creative ideas you've got there?
I had an anecdote from it was the gentleman who led our parking strategy, and his experience was he was staying at the Coast Hotel at the time and asked the front desk intentionally, how do I get downtown? And they said, well, you get in your car and you drive. And he said, well, what if I want to walk? And she's like, why would you want to walk? It's like a 15, 20-minute walk. So he left and he timed it, and it was, I think, under 10 minutes is what it was. And so, you know, we've got great pathways now. It's a matter of connecting, being able to provide them with the information and collaborate. We had, I think, historically done a lot more of that pre-COVID, and so hopefully now with things opening up, we can get back to the table where we were looking at BIA and Hotel Association coordination on that messaging. At this point, it's not happening.
Thank you. I wonder if I may, one more. Can you talk about e-bikes, scooters that kind of service the co-op share bike services, and what that looks like for businesses coming in to look at Canmore right now? Are we a viable option?
Yeah, but for a long time we've held off on entertaining e-scooters in particular. I think an e-bike share at this point is something that's a no-brainer. I think that would be really successful. We did hold off on that as well. We had a lot of hotels that were sitting in front of a pathway that was in a ditch that was 1.5 meters wide.
Right.
And so trying to bring visitors into our community, educate them on how to ride a bike, many haven't in a while, and then send them out into poor infrastructure wasn't something we were prepped to encourage. Now we've got a great path along Bow Valley Trail. We've got a great network through Spring Creek. Certainly the time is right to start considering that, and really it's just, we've had both local companies and others that are operating in Calgary and other communities in Alberta reach out. They want to come here and start e-scooter service. We just haven't had an opportunity to get that going.
I look forward to seeing some of those services.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Sartay, for your presentation. When I think about intercept parking lots, I'm not thinking about people who are staying overnight in a hotel. I'm thinking about day trippers, people who are out for the day and then heading back to wherever they have to go. What would be a solution for those types of visitors if an intercept parking lot isn't necessarily something that we're going to pursue?
Typically, folks are arriving 2s, 3s, 4s, so they're already kind of moving along the spectrum. They're car share, they're carpooling. And so if a visitor was to come in to Canmore thinking realistically about it when you go visit a community, unless it's a really short walking distance, you want to drive to your destination. And often they'll have multiple destinations in the community. You know, they've been up at the Nordic Center, they want to come stop downtown. So trying to intercept those folks and get them to walk from any of the locations that are available to us is a challenge. But to have them be part of the lessened volume of traffic that comes into downtown and then pays for parking, which then in turn funds transit, they arrive in 2s and 3s and 4s, they come and spend money, they turn that parking over. That's actually a pretty reasonable and high value use of our downtown parking stock. Right. So at this point, in the absence of there being that magic bullet or apparent site that really would solve that problem, pay parking is the answer.
Are we in any way responsible or working to manage the parking that's overflowing from the Visitor Information Center on the very west end of Bow Valley Trail that spills down Palliser? Like to where the Secret Spring is? Like there are people, like once that Legacy Trail parking lot fills up, people are on the other side and it's lined up. And I've seen it go halfway to Cross Sea in summer.
Yeah. It has come up in the past as a safety issue, and I know work has been done to delineate it, to just keep people out of certain parts where, on the curves in particular. In general, other than that, there hasn't been, that I'm aware of. I can check in with bylaw. Are you suggesting we should charge for parking over there?
Yes. Or like, can we charge for parking at the visit, like charge for parking anywhere you want, right? Like Visitor Information Center might be, but over there, I mean, if it's okay for people to park there and there's no safety issues, but it just felt like in the last 2 years that the parking at the Visitor Information Center in relation to the Legacy Trail is at a point where it's beyond capacity for a certain portion of the year. And I know it's not our Visitor Information Center or our parking lot, but I didn't know if there was work on that happening, because I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of.
And then my last question. There's talk about a potential rail between Banff and Calgary with a stop in Canmore. What kind of a game changer for our strategies that we're pursuing with transportation would that have?
Council's approved a project to look a little closer at what impact that might have on the community. I will say at present we're collaborating with Banff and Parks Canada on the On It program. This year we'll introduce Friday hours in addition to the regular weekend service. And that's been a successful initiative where we're seeing really strong uptake and growth. So I think that there is demand for regional transit, and it's just a question of how best to provide that, connecting where people are to where they want to be and really encouraging them to use it. So in the meantime, we're quite focused on it and keen to see what happens with an additional Friday day this year.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Crowser, and thank you, Mr. Sarte, for your presentation. I'd like to ask you some questions about the ripeness for car cooperative in Canmore in relation to car ownership. So what I've discovered, and I'm sure others have as well in the last 2 years, is owning a second vehicle in Canada now is a wealthy pursuit. Cost of gas, increase of insurance at over 30% in our province. And so if we're already struggling with affordability in Canmore, I'm wondering if there are any other strategies that we could look at that you've touched on in your presentation, quite frankly, that would encourage or help a family consider becoming a one-car family, not out of an experiment, which is what my family did, but more out of an ability to bring our living wage number down even more. And I don't want to talk about car share. That's very different than car co-op.
Okay. I was going to speak to car share. We haven't had anyone approach, and I'm kind of surprised.
Well, we don't have a population.
There have been some folks that have considered car co-op within a particular development, and we certainly encourage that. The parking requirements allow for reduced parking if that's provided.
On a building-by-building basis, but what about on a community basis?
It's
Much
not-
like they do, like in the Kootenays, actually, Revelstoke, Kimberley, Nelson, Fernie. They have one cooperative that all of them are sharing vehicles through.
I would be happy to pursue it.
All right.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it. One thought I did have is we have an area structure plan for the Stoneworks Creek area. And that should present an opportunity. It's an isolated place. You can't have overflow parking issues. Is there a model? It costs, it can add $500 per month to living costs to add an indoor parking space for a development. And then that takes away space for units. So if you could look at a development where the amount of parking and vehicles were minimized, you can up density and decrease the cost per person. And then if there were to be a co-op with something like that, then you can envision dramatically reducing both housing and transportation costs in a development and making that a really attractive place to be able to walk and cycle across the highway, have a dedicated transit route. So certainly something to consider both for retrofit and also for community planning.
One of our strategies was that we rented a car from the rental agency here, but that's becoming also quite a lot more expensive and not necessarily reliable. They were closed for the month of January and February this year, so we weren't able to.
No cars.
It got kind of sticky, but I just.
Ms. Smithers wanted to contribute something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is a really good discussion around the car co-ops or even car share if you go there. I just want to caution council that it is kind of blue skying and thinking out loud. I think it can be difficult in situations like this where we start to generate ideas in front of council for projects that aren't scoped or we don't know how it's all going to fit together even in that Palace or Stoneworks Creek area. So these are great ideas and their ideas. So I just want to kind of caution about going too far down a path where we haven't done the research to be able to speak knowledgeably about what can happen in an area.
Of course, Ms. Smithers, but I think the public would like to see that we're actually battling these ideas around publicly, and that's what the Committee of the Whole in my mind has always been about, is about having conversations with administration. But I appreciate your caution. Thank you.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to note that they're not on the plan, but it's important to also, throw those ideas out so that administration gets a sense of some of the things that are interesting to council. I think one of the and I really appreciate your presentation, and I know we're getting a little bit we're looking at it a lot through our affordability lens, and which is, of course, I think the biggest factor affecting us here in Canmore, and of course, transportation, as you said, has a huge impact on that. I want to ask a question around the future of public transit, like the growth of it. I think that the biggest movement of the needle will when we have greater reach and frequency of public transit, because it's all year round. If it can become something that's really easy to use for lots of neighborhoods and that sort of thing. And perhaps whether it's you or maybe it's members of the Transit Commission, is there a sort of like a looking ahead plan of when things might be rolled out for like a Bow Valley Trail, a Palliser Trail, Larch, and increasing frequency? Is there a long-term plan that takes a look at those things? Obviously subject to funding, subject to, a whole lot of things.
At present, no. It's certainly something that's envisioned in the strategic plans of the Commission. In order to meet our own 5% mode shift goal, it requires something like a 5-fold increase in ridership. So certainly that is inherent in that goal, that you need to expand service and increase frequency. And certainly it's something we can take a deeper look into to do some preliminary work around what routes could look like, service catchments, frequency, and then make estimates of ridership based on those.
It's certainly a conversation I'm interested in participating in the next while, and speaking with Mr. Bean and others. I mean, and when I would look at your, and I think it's exactly right, if we can keep more vehicles in the hotel parking lots, it effectively is an intercept parking of sorts. And I think of, in addition to having, maybe some e-scooters available that are available sometimes a year, or a walking path that sometimes it's not available, but a bus running right down Bow Valley Trail, all year round on a regular frequency could really move that needle, as well as going to our neighborhood. So anyway, that's an item of interest. Yeah. So thank you for that. Councillor McCown, did you have another comment or no? Okay. Councillor Ma.
Thanks for your presentation there, Andy. I'm just asking the question because you might have a better understanding of this sort of stuff. Like, with the profile of say, like a transit user versus someone that does, like, say, e-bike, is it the sort of thing that someone e-bikes also uses transit, or is it the sort of thing that someone uses transit and then they hop into the e-bike thing and then they just become an e-biker? Like, I'm just curious if you've seen any of that sort of stuff, or your thoughts towards it.
Yep. Ultimately, we're all human, and all of us almost exclusively make decisions based on convenience, cost, time. So what we tend to see is that people will pick fast, cheap, convenient options if they're provided them. Time convenience often is associated with driving until you get stuck in the traffic jam with everybody else that has to drive because there are no other options. And in a truly multimodal city, what you'll see is people will interchangeably go between a mix of travel options depending on what they're doing that particular day.
Okay.
So there's no type, there's not a biker. It's somebody who cycles because that's the most convenient, comfortable, safe way for them to get back and forth to work. But then they'll drive for their weekend activities or take a bus to go to a dentist.
They'll take the bus or something. Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you.
So really it's about widening that spectrum of options to give people a choice so that they're then able to elect different ways to travel. And e-scooters are just one piece of that puzzle where you arrive at your hotel, you're looking around, you see an e-scooter.
That could be fun.
What's that thing?
Yeah.
Go give that a try.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Seeing no more questions on that one, thank you very much for that transportation introduction. And is this your invisible little friend?
I am the invisible Trevor.
He's there.
Yeah.
Showed up.
Hello, Mr. Reader.
Good day.
And,
Fair warning, if you hear screaming and crying in the background, it's my non-invisible children.
Okay. Well, I'm glad
Hopefully
that you're
they will
not
be
just,
quiet.
I'm glad that you're not just Mr. Asarte's figment of his imagination. And are you going to be presenting on the West Bow River Pathway concept design?
I am. Can you
Excellent.
see
Well,
my
welcome.
screen? One second. Apparently.
Are you trying to screen share? Is that?
Yeah, Zoom is not letting me screen share.
Is there a permission that needs to be granted, or?
Yeah, I need
I'm
to
just
leave.
looking to the clerks. No. Okay.
Yeah, I might have to leave the meeting and just pop back in. I'll try that. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay. Let's try this
Okay,
again.
welcome back.
Thank you.
And there we go.
There you go. Terrific. All right. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. It's good to be here. I'm Trevor, as Andy mentioned. I'm a project manager with the engineering department here at the town. And I'm going to discuss planned upgrades to the West Bow River Pathway, also known as the Three Sisters Pathway between the Bow River Bridge and Van Horn. So I'll start by giving you a little bit of background info, and then I'll dig into what we've identified as the priority improvements along this stretch path, which will inform the initial scope of the project. Grounds for the project are the guiding principles contained in the town's 2018 Integrated Transportation Plan. It emphasizes the importance of providing year-round multimodal connections and ensuring that our active modes network is safe and accessible for all ages and all abilities through all of our seasons. The active modes network is a crucial variable in supporting our mode shift targets and advancing the transportation equity that Andy discussed previously. So the ITP identifies a 35% target for future trips to be active trips. In 2018, the combined share was 18, and the ITP predicted that actually would shrink without an effective effort to improve and grow our active transportation networks and facilities. So the purpose of this project is primarily to support our need for a continuous, accessible, all ages, all abilities, year-round active network, which will safely increase the functional capacity of our active facilities and support our mode shift goals. The West Bow River Pathway from the Bow River Bridge to Van Horn is a popular recreational trail and a crucial link for active transportation users. Follows a strong desire line between the town center and existing and future development up in Three Sisters. Its present condition is deficient as compared to the active networks to which it connects to the north and south. This deficiency gets noted in the ITP, which identifies the West Bow River Path as a 5.5 meter future dedicated cycle facility between the Bow River Bridge and Prospect Bridge, and then as a 3.5 meter future shared use path between Prospect Bridge and the existing shared use path down behind Van Horn. In TSMV's most recent ASP applications that were defeated in 2021, traffic impact assessment was completed. Traffic impact assessment supports the ITP improvement recommendations, and it notes that depending on how the Three Sisters area ultimately develops, future expansion of the southern shared use path into a dedicated facility is probably going to be required. It also identifies the probable need for an additional active modes crossing on the Bow River, likely down by Mine Meadows there behind Van Horn. In the Boar River Bridge to the Three Sisters corridor, there's two major active user collectors. Three Sisters Drive, which is identified as a future complete streets candidate and a dedicated cycle facility, and the West Boar River Pathway, which is in need of improvements to provide safe year-round accessibility that we're looking for. Future facility and connectivity improvements are intended to provide our active users with an efficient and convenient mesh width in order to encourage active transportation over motorized transportation. The West Boar River Pathway project, it's a key piece of the connectivity of our overall network, and it will support the continued improvement of local and other major key connections. So the initial scope of the project is intended to address priority conflict areas and provide the base infrastructure to support future paving, which will enable winter maintenance and future expansion as required. So our tentative initial scope as of right now includes realignment of the path through excuse me, West Canmore Park and a replacement of the Prospect Bridge at Canmore Creek. Addressing poor sight lines and some excessive grades immediately south of the junction along the Prospect emergency access. Addressing some narrow facilities, excessive grades, and a replacement of the Homestead's stormwater outfall bridge. And at the very southern end, realignment of the southernmost portion to move the pathway back from the riverbank and eliminate some side slopes. Our current approved budget for detailed design and construction is $1.5 million, and our existing budget is over allocated for the initial scope that I'm discussing. Additional budget is going to be required in the future. The two bridge structures consume the vast majority of our initial budget, and we're working to value engineer those structures to bring them a little more in line with what current and future needs are. Depending on our bridge procurement timelines, construction for foundations for the new Prospect Bridge is tentatively expected to happen either late this summer or this fall. Pathway work is not expected to take place until spring and fall of 2023, and paving, which would require additional budget allocation, would occur as soon as this current scope is complete and we find those additional funds. So I'll quickly just run through those four sections, the existing conditions and initial scope that we are hoping to accomplish. Prospect Bridge at Canmore Creek is 3-meter wide wooden structure. It was erected in about 1996. The main structural span is a pair of glulam beams. They're difficult to maintain due to the environmental requirements of their location. The northern approach is narrow, it's boulder lined, it's got a fairly sharp curve. Southern approach is super narrow, it's very steep, has an immediate almost 90-degree corner. Grades between the bridge and Prospect emergency access are almost 14%. There's a pretty well-worn side trail, which suggests users are frequently exiting the path in search of a more frictionless route. And the rock retaining wall beneath the pathway and access route south of the bridge is in need of some attention. In the fall of last year, Parks identified a localized failure in the wall, and subsequent geotechnical review has recommended additional detailed investigation and at least a partial reconstruction. So detailed and geotechnical investigation is happening this week. Boreholes are being drilled for some soil analysis, and a preliminary retaining wall design is going to follow. We'll be back to see you in the fall for a capital project for budget considerations. Partially due to those uncertainties around that wall, we've chosen to take the path quite a bit further to the south. So this is the new alignment. It avoids the portion of the wall that likely requires some reconstruction. It also avoids the excessive grades and the difficult alignment south of the existing bridge. As we continue to the south, pathway junction with Prospect emergency access is pretty narrow, very steep. I suspect lots of you have ridden it. It's quite a little drop there when you first come off the emergency access. There's a series of S-curves through the trees, and the sight lines aren't great, and the pathway width ranges from 2.2 to 2.4 meters. There's some wear on the shoulders, which sort of suggests that pathway users are exiting the path to go past each other, which suggests there's conflicts there. So through this section, the idea is we'll provide minimal realignments, a little bit of widening of the pathway and a smoothing of the curves to provide some better sight lines and mitigate those existing conflicts. Most of the work in this section is going to be to regrading to eliminate the abrupt and steep transition at the Y junction. Continuing on, the Homestead Stormwater Bridge is a wooden structure similar to the Prospect Bridge. Bridge is very, very narrow. It's just under 1.5 meters. Hinders summer and winter pathway maintenance. It increases user conflicts. Sits quite low compared to the path either side, nearly 2 meters below the path either side. So creates some poor sight lines and some very steep grades coming in and out in either direction. We don't plan to do a lot of regrading and realignment through this section. Mainly, we're mitigating conflicts by replacing the bridge with a wider structure, and we'll raise that crossing to eliminate the grades coming in and out. And finally, the southern end, we need to address a slightly different kind of user risk. Section encroaches quite close to the river embankment. There's a bit of a side slope in some areas, and there's some riverbank erosion. The existing path runs right along the top of the erosion slope. So the intent here is to run the pathway further away from the embankment. We'll bench it into the slope a little bit further, improve the side slopes and some drainage, and then tie into the existing multi-use path at the southern limits. So the delivery of the project is intended to support our year-round active network, provide people with safe, continuous, all ages, all abilities access, and increase the functional capacity of our active facilities and support those mode shift goals. And that is the end.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Reeder.
You bet.
That was a nice walkthrough of what's being planned there. I had a question. Where the path is realigned quite significantly, like it really moves away from the older path, and I think there was 1 or 2 sections that really did that. Is the old path planning to be rehabilitated so it doesn't look like a path, and maybe there's some boulders put down or something like that, just to help direct people and keep them on the new path?
Yeah, so the intent at this point, through West Canmore Park, where the existing bridge and the existing path deviates quite a bit. At present, we're planning to leave that added section as a sort of like a dog walk path or a mountain bike path that people can use to deviate from the heavier volume facility. Some of the other smaller realignments, there will be rehabilitation that happens. Just topsoil and native grasses and such.
Right, and then of course, the thought being that those who want to be, when it's ultimately paved, it will be obviously a nicer ride or wherever, and they'll go with the new realignment and then leave the gravel for walkers.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Looking to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Graham.
Just to clarify one, we are paving this section, is that correct? Yes. Okay.
That is the intent, yes.
Yeah.
Subject to future capital approvals.
Future budget. I'm going to dig in my pockets.
Yeah. Great.
So we won't be paving this one at this time, but we are going to do it. We are looking to do it in the future.
Yeah, we'd like to, tentatively, it would be ideal if it could happen sort of fall 2023. But obviously, depending on progress of this initial phase, and bridge procurement is a bit of a mixed bag at the moment, so it's slightly unpredictable.
Just to add to that, we're looking at the bridge structures, value engineering them, seeing how we can try to make all the pieces fit. It's a multi-year project, so we'll come back to council with a plan of how to get it done if it can't all get done within the budget right now, how to stage that work out so that ultimately it does get paved.
Right. My understanding is the plan to pave it, and to make it be able to be maintained in the winter. It's just a matter of how far this budget will get us, and if more is needed, we'll need to approve
Thank you all for that. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Reader, and thank you very much, Mr. Asarte.
You bet. Thank you very much, everyone.
We'll now move to item E, Councillor Updates. And thank you to everyone for submitting reports. We will go through each one. Does anybody have any questions with regards to my report? Seeing none, Councillor Faubert's report. Any questions there? Let me know if I'm going too fast. Moving on to Councillor Graham's report. None. Councillor Hillstad's report. Councillor Ma, I would note that I appreciated your comment about a Zoom call with grade 6 students. I am going to be having a discussion about municipal governance with a brownie troop this evening, and I'm looking forward to that. It's my daughter-in-law's brownie troop, and she says that she apologizes in advance for any questions that might be inappropriate. She says, "Yeah, can't control what is said." So I'm looking forward to it. So, any questions of Councillor Ma's report? Councillor Faubert.
Are we part of the Northern Lights SWANA chapter? Or is Bow Valley Waste Management Commission a member?
It's more the Bow Valley Waste Management Commission, not TOC specifically per se. Yeah.
But, okay, sorry, it's, so Northern Lights SWANA,
Yeah.
the member-based association, are we a member? Like,
I'm sorry, that was-
is the town of Canmore a member or the Waste Commission a member?
I believe it's the Waste Commission.
Okay.
Yeah, so they run it, and then, so we'll have some representatives from Waste Management Commission going. So I believe Andrew and Peter Duck from Banff will be going, and, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Are they presenting anything?
I don't think they're presenting, but because they're hosting in this part of the world, they'll be doing some tours and stuff. So Andrew, by de facto, will be, giving tours of the landfill, and, yeah, all those things. Yeah.
Landfill tours.
Okay.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
This looks like a good opportunity.
Councillor, any questions of Councillor Mara's report? And any questions for Councillor McCallum? Very good. Thank you very much, everyone, for submitting. Oh, Councillor Graham, under the wire. Yes.
I just wondered, I have a really hard time reading these graphs as to which year is which year. It's probably a function of something, but I was wondering if I couldn't choose some different colors and dots. Maybe I'm just getting too old to read these things. I don't know.
So it's funny, it was switched to this a year ago, and it's much better than it was before.
Oh.
So,
Oh, boy.
and even more funny is that the clerk did y'all a favor, because I had it squished quite small. I had them inside by each, and now it makes me look like I'm a kindergartner in terms of my report, because my graphs take up, what, 3 whole pages? I just, because I had nothing new to report, I thought I would just provide y'all with some statistics to see how we were recovering.
I like it.
I love the statistics. I just
I
have a
know.
really hard time reading the graph.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. This is how they come, friend.
Sounds good.
Bifocals.
Upgraded glasses.
Health spending
Works for
account.
me.
Right on.
HSA, health spending account. I'll see if I can find a link to stats. I don't know if there is one, but that might help. I expect that the reason why they're kind of difficult to see is maybe because I copied and pasted them in and then the clerk expanded them. And that's maybe where some of it's lost. Anyways, so thanks for saving my tail, clerk. Sorry that it affected your ability to see Councillor Graham.
All right.
It's funny, that's not the question I thought was going to be asked, but anyways.
What question did you think was going to be asked?
I realized that I woke up yesterday morning realizing I try not to use acronyms. And so if you notice in the AUMA Self and Healthy Communities, I was actually thinking somebody was going to ask me, what is the HSAA? And I can't remember. It's the health, it's the union.
Yes, it's.
Thank you. And that's what I actually thought the question was going to be. And I realized I was going to look it up this morning before I came, and I forgot.
There you go. All right.
This is how I overthink things. You're welcome.
Thank you. No further questions on council updates, then moving to the administrative update. And we will go section by section. First of all, Section A, CAO's office. Any questions there? Section B, municipal services. Give you a chance to flip. Yep, Councillor Faubert.
I'm waiting for the next section.
Okay. Then you're first up for Section C, corporate services.
I have a question for the municipal clerk. I'm wondering if we have a FOIP bylaw. Like, in terms of the access to information request, do we have anything that allows us to charge fees or recover costs?
Yeah, so the ability to charge fees is set out in the Act that was passed in 2004, I think, or no, 1994.
Yeah.
So fees are still from the Act from that time. So there's very little that we can charge for.
When I did take that Emerging Trends in Municipal Law course, and one of the presentations was around FOIP, and part of the information that was presented was that municipalities can create a FOIP bylaw that would give us the ability to update and do something like that.
You're still restricted to the limits in the Act. Yeah, we do have a FOIP bylaw that allows us to charge fees. I should have answered that question better. But you still can't charge more than is permitted by the Act.
Okay.
Or for different things.
Perfect. That's it.
Councillor Graham.
Sorry, if I might go back to recreation services, or sorry, protective services. Will the old email still function after we go to enforcement? Will it be forwarded, I'm assuming?
I don't know, but that ideally, yes. So I will ask and let you know.
Thank you.
It should be in the report, but it's not.
No, in the report they're going to write.
Oh, yeah, they'll talk about it in May. No, I'm kidding.
The report.
The report. Okay. And, okay. Then were there any other questions on B or C? Okay, moving on to D, municipal infrastructure. Councillor Mah.
Question for Ms. Smitters. For the parking app, will we get to see as council like a little prototype version of when that comes out before it goes to public?
I don't know, but I can certainly follow up with the parking team on that.
Okay. Electro Mega is the best name ever for a company.
Sounds like a superhero.
Capes and those, like that headset? Like
I will find you parking
the X-Men?
anywhere.
Yeah.
I am Electro Mega. Finding parking is my superpower. Yeah.
Next question.
Any other questions with regards to D, It's a big section. I'll let you flip through. All right, we're good. Okay, then I will turn to the resolution action list, item G. Is there any questions or anything there? Anything that says that it's a date complete, this is the last time it will appear. So make your peace with it. It's going away. All right. And any questions arising from the correspondence? Seeing none, I will move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone.